Recording in progress.
Hey. Whew. Okay. Oh, you gotta mute yourself there. Are we good? Oh,
I'm working on it.
there we go. Right?
Yep,
Okay,
that'll
great.
do it.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. So the first item is to review and approve the agenda. Well, there is some logistics. That's number 2, but I will talk about those, I think, in a little bit. So do we have any adjustments to the agenda? Does anybody know about adjustments to be made? Jack?
There was the one thing that I was thinking we should take off the consent agenda.
We can talk
The-
about that when we get to the consent
Okay.
agenda. Okay.
And then the other thing, it looked like the way the agenda was printed that there was a redundancy of 2 items.
The USDA item.
Yeah.
It's
Is
not
that
letting
not
me
right?
unmute. I guess I didn't. Anyway, yeah, so they're 2 same. We have to have a formal public hearing, so I had to be warned that way, but it's really all one item.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other changes to the agenda? All right. All right. So with that, we'll consider the agenda approved. So we are going to move on to general business and appearances. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on any topic that is otherwise not on our agenda. If you have an item or a comment to make on an item that is on our agenda, we typically take those up adjacent to that agenda. So you'll have a chance to say that when it becomes, when it comes up in the agenda. If you're going to make a comment, if you'd say your name, where you live, and try to keep your comments to 2 minutes, that would be excellent. Donna over here is going to help us with timing. So she'll hold up something at 1 minute, and at 2 minutes, let you know to stop. And please keep your comments, if you do make comments about an agenda item, keep them germane to the topic. And I think that is it. That's all I want to say for now. All right, general business and appearances. Yes. City
yeah, I'd just
Manager.
like to make a comment. Today, the city released a statement about an incident related to potential violence at Montpelier schools. First of all, I'd like to commend the police department for their swift action in this and taking address. Secondly, I think there's been some fair criticism levied as to the timing of our release of information. And I'd just like to say, there's never a good time. The matter was under investigation. There's no evidence of an actual crime being committed. It's not illegal to have guns in your home. There are things that people can say, especially not during school hours, that may not rise to the level of what Vermont statutes call criminal threat. And the matter's under active investigation. So finally, we decided today that we should release it. I think we could have released it earlier. There was no real reason. And if people are upset by that, I take responsibility and apologize. The school handled it their own way, and I'm not going to speak for them, but from the city and the police department's end, we only want the safety of our kids and the community. And certainly happy to meet this head on, and I suspect we'll have further information released tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to probably speak a little bit more about that when we get to our item about gun violence, the gun violence proclamation, which is coming up. But other comments? Yes. Yep. Sorry, and also we'll take people in person first, and then we'll go to folks who are with us digitally.
Hi, I'm Linda Berger, and I live in District 1. On the agenda tonight are discussions of the Vactor dump station, the USDA funding for the Water Resource Recovery Facility, and the Water Resource Recovery Facility odor update. These 3 agenda items address the council's strategic goal of improving public health and safety. The primary focus of the facility's phase 1 upgrade was making the plant a net zero facility. thus supporting the city's goal of practicing good environmental stewardship. The focus for the city broadened to include air quality on 11/5/2021 with receipt of a notice of alleged violation of air pollution control regulations from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. I think I'm under 2 minutes. The notice required corrective actions. Recent concerns over leachate caused the council to pay attention to the health and safety impacts of water discharged from the plant. The phase 2 odor control infrastructure work at the facility will not begin until summer 2023. It will not be completed until fall 2024. I appreciate that the council is attending to the health and safety impacts of the facility on Montpelier residents, and I urge the city to fund a short-term air quality fix while waiting for the phase 2 project to be completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And we'll talk further about that when we get there. Further comments? Yes.
I just have a question, maybe Bill could probably answer. I think it was in the bridge that they're saying that the marijuana dispensary is going to be the first retail sales store in Vermont. Is it true? I read it somewhere, so that's why I'm here to ask. Is this true?
It is true that it's going to be, that it is seeking to become a retail sales store. I don't know whether it will be the first in Vermont. It probably will. I think it will be the first in Montpelier.
Well, the thing was, is if it was going to be first, I was wondering if we could put a city 5% tax on it and use that, you know, like you do for restaurants, use that to fund the homeless committee instead of putting a $400,000 item on the ballot. Is that how you say it? Okay, you know how we voted on that? But if we had like a 5%, because I'll tell you, if that's going to be the first one, you're going to get people from all over the state up here buying. And if we had a, well, it's true. If you ever heard of that Eddie Topper beer, remember people were coming from out of state for it. You know, people from Burlington would be here, you know, and if we could get a 5% to fund that, you know, get everybody else to pay for it instead of the citizens here. I don't know. Can you do that?
Yeah, I can chime in there. I did take the tour of the dispensary.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, you know, there'd be 4 maybe that would have the potential of opening as early as right now. Nobody's ready. I think this one may be slated to go July, and the rest may not go until October. So it could very well be the first retail dispensary in the state. Now, the problem is, I like how you're thinking, but but the statute limits us to only collecting what we do currently for the use tax, which is like 1%.
The state's going to get half
So
of it,
Tom-
so it's going to bring us to that.
So we can't
2.5%.
we can't go above what the state statute allows us to, unfortunately, but we can lobby for it.
Tom, did you have anything further?
Uh-huh.
Anything further?
Do I have time? One question, you know how the big talk on the water bills and everything here? I'm just curious, how come on your property tax bill, there's also another charge on there for water? It makes it like 5 water payments, not 1, not 4. But I don't understand why that's there. We have water bills every quarter.
So there's a water and sewer benefit charge as well as a CSO benefit charge. And those were basically due to federal orders that the city was required to comply with. And so those have benefit to all residents, whether they are on the water or sewer systems themselves. It's been authorized by the legislature to do this. And it's been in place for even predating me. One of the benefits of it is that non-taxable entities such as the state, churches and things, nonprofits also pay that. So anybody does that. So it is slightly separate. It's not really a property tax. It's a sewer and water and CSO benefit charge.
So does the state and nonprofits also have a water bill, 4-quarter
Yes.
water? They do.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Yep.
Before you sit down, I know most people here know who you are, but would you identify yourself so that people watching can know who you are also?
Thomas Moore, District 3, Prospect Street.
Thank you.
Steve Whitaker, Montpelier. So first, I'm going to protest the 2-minute constraint because when it's unfair to the public to have to bring things up 2 months, 2 years, and still have y'all not take action on them. And so for me to have to repeat them coming out of my 2 minutes is grossly unjust. And your 2-minute limit won't hold up in court. You really discourage public participation while you pretend that you encourage it. It's lip service, it's disingenuous, and you need to address that. It's not worth taking photos if everybody just passes it by without even taking a look at it. There's lots of photos that would evidence what I bring forward. We've got a fire escape, a third floor fire escape that's been blocked by a Christmas tree still in the stand for 6 months now. You know, where is our building inspector? Where is our fire inspector? So this has gone from incompetence to corruption, and y'all are complicit in it when you allow these repeated issues of missing public records and lying police officers and stealing police officers and you don't put them on the agenda for examination. You don't hire professionals to dig into and verify who's telling the truth. You're afraid to expose the lies your city manager dispenses. So you really need to realize that you've crossed the line into corruption. You're running a corrupt little city here, and it's unfair to all of us. So 2 weeks ago, I mentioned the trash buildup over on the bike path, and it's still there. It's worse. The poor people there are spending their beer money to buy garbage bags to try to pick up after themselves, and we can't even give them the dignity of having our garbage contractor pick it up. People are defecating over there and urinating, but the defecation is really the hazard. That's a health hazard, and it's partially because the city is not enforcing its, you're looking for my time to be up, huh? It's partially because the city is not enforcing its lease to keep the bathrooms open and or taking over that lease and keeping the bathrooms open consistently. You push things through on the consent agenda, like the police contract, like the city manager's contract, denying the public an opportunity to expose the corruption of Bill Frazier, amending his own contract to protect his golden parachute, even if he's convicted of a crime, you know, and that's just corrupt. You're buying into that corruption. So today we approved the public works contract. Today we had two public employees sitting in an air-conditioned truck with it idling, watching paint dry. Okay, and how is that with your net zero, goals? They could have easily, if it weren't for that union contract, had one person supervise the drying paint while the other two went down and painted another crosswalk.
So Steve, you're at 3 minutes now. I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments.
I made public records requests that came due yesterday. It still did not respond. Appeals to the head of the agency. This guy is his sovereign impunity thinks he can just say, "Oh, sorry, that's on me. I can ignore the law." And it's up to you to hold him accountable and or get a professional or an attorney to abide by public records law. Otherwise, y'all are scofflaws.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Thanks for cutting me off because I know you
Hey,
care so much about me.
so you're done talking. Thank you. You do not need to interrupt me. Steve, you are, I'm going to call you out of order for talking back to me and talking out of turn. If you speak out of order again, I'm going to ask you to leave. So let's just be clear. That's your warning. Thank you. Jack.
With regard to the garbage cleanup, I think it's a good point that shouldn't be left to lie out there. So could we ask the Department of Public Works to look at that?
Did, and we have, and to Mr. Whitaker's credit, he actually called in earlier today and let us know this would be coming up. They're going to be out there tomorrow to get those, and we did get the ones last time. It's just built up again. Thanks. And with regard to the public records request that was just referenced, he's right. We're a day late. I actually wrote to him, said, "I'm sorry, we're a day late." It was his request for all public records of anyone telling people not to talk to him, which we highly likely do not exist at all. However, rather than just check, we've decided to check all through the police department just to make sure some corporal didn't tell some police sergeant, hey, you don't have to talk to that guy. So we're going the extra mile. I acknowledge that we were late, apologized to him, told him we'd get him. I don't know what else we can do.
Okay.
And it's a very frivolous request, I might add.
Anyone else in person? Okay, I know we have a couple folks with us digitally. We're going to start with Elaine Ball. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Elaine Ball. I live in Montpelier, and I wanted to bring this up during general business because I haven't had the time to attend a council meeting before now. I moved here in August, and since last June, I've been planning Montpelier Pride 2022. So I just wanted to bring it to the council's agenda that Montpelier Pride will be taking place not this weekend, but the following, the first weekend in June. And there will be a festival on the State House lawn on Saturday, June 4th from noon to 5. We're very, very excited that Toussaint St. Negritude will be our MC for the event, and there will be many nonprofits and local government agencies tabling and sharing resources and information with the community. If you'd like to learn more about the events happening all weekend, you can visit pridecentervt.org. And if anyone would like to volunteer, we still need volunteers. You can email me at elaineballvt@gmail.com. Really quick, I'll send this in an email, but I would love to request that Mayor Ann Watson, if you would be willing, that you could possibly declare the month of June Pride Month in the city of Montpelier. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you. Just checking the item E on our consent agenda. We will be flying the Pride flag during the month of June, but I would be delighted to declare June Pride Month. And so let's work together to get some like an actual proclamation together, and we can have that on the next agenda item or the next meeting. And it might, what's today? We're at the end of May, so that might be in June. Is that okay?
Right, definitely. If it's sometime in June, that's fine. I realize my request is a little late.
Okay, let's make it happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we'll go now to Peter Kelman. Go ahead. We cannot hear you yet. You're still muted. If you want to.
Am I muted now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
That was tough. Peter Kelman, Mountain View Street, Montpelier. At the end of last city council meeting, during which the council voted 4-2 to remove the Guertin structure from its Main Street location and place it in storage, councilpersons Bate and Harrell both urged that concrete goals, actions, and self-imposed deadlines be set to address the unmet needs of unhoused members of our community. Yet, I note with sadness and concern that not a single item on tonight's agenda appears to address these needs, unless perhaps we'll hear something about them toward the end of the meeting from other business or the city manager's report or city council's report. Specifically, it would be comforting to hear that, one, the restroom committee, which was created last June, has at last scheduled a meeting. Two, that lockers have been ordered and a date set for their installation. That was approved at the last meeting. Three, that steps have been taken to appropriately publicize the availability of showers at the rec center. This was mentioned by Councilor Bate, and that perhaps arrangements have been made with some charities to make available towels and toiletries. Fourth, that a concrete plan be underway to provide a cooled and inviting space in public buildings, in particular City Hall, including on weekends, because we don't know when the heat's going to hit. It could hit on weekends. And number five, that the Homelessness Task Force has met and will soon make concrete recommendations for all sorts of matters. And finally, that but particularly that a more permanent ways are to in being recommended to address the cold weather sheltering issues and longer term issues related to homelessness. I hope we're going to be hearing about these things later in this meeting and in every meeting from now until forever. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with us digitally wish to make a comment? You can unmute yourself or turn your camera on and wave. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone, so we are going to move on then. All right, so we are on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda? Jack, go ahead.
I move that we remove item G from the consent agenda and pass the remainder of the consent agenda.
And there's a second. Any further discussion? Jack?
I had one question about item E, the pride flag display request. I recall there was an issue with the flagpoles and whether we can fly a different flag because it's the flagpole in front of the manager's office is taller than the other one.
So we address that with our flag policy. It'll actually fly on the flag below the American. We'll take down the city flag and fly the pride flag for the month, the same that we did with the Black Lives Matter flag for that month, and then put the city flag back at the end of the month.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, and I think it would make sense for us, I'd like to take it up just right now if we could. So let's take up item G.
I will ask Deputy Public Works Director Kurt Monica to address this.
Hello.
Hello.
Kurt Monica, Deputy Director, City Engineer, Department of Public Works. So I'll explain a little bit about what the Vector dump station is intended for. So the city has a jetter truck. We call it our Vector truck. We use it to clean the sewer mains in the city. And in addition, so it uses high pressure water to pull debris out of the sewer main, and then it pulls it through a suction tube into the tank of the truck. And right now, the only way that we have to deal with the waste in that truck is to dump it in a 40-yard roll-off at the wastewater plant. And then we have to eventually bring that roll-off to the landfill once it's full. And there's a number of challenges with that. Often it will spill. And this roll-off is located at the wastewater plant, and all the storm system goes into the influent. So it's not a water quality issue per se, but it is an operational issue in that in order to bring it to the landfill, we have to decant the water. So any rainwater that comes during the cleaning process of the sewer lines, that has to be pulled off the top of the dumpster with the Vector truck again, bled into the wastewater plant until we can get as much of it solids as we can to bring to the landfill. So the proposal is to construct concrete walls and a slab with a drain that goes directly into the influent of the pipe. So the material we're cleaning out of the sewers is essentially domestic wastewater, so residential sewage. And that's exactly what is in in the pipe that comes into the plant. So there's no change to the waste stream that is going to be entering the plant as a result of constructing this Vector dump station. But it would eliminate this roll off, which takes hours and hours of staff time to manage, to decant the water, to fill, to clean up spills. So there's a major operational savings. It'll save us a lot of time in order to improve efficiencies with cleaning the sewer mains. But in addition to that, I feel it will reduce odors from the plant. So instead of having this big open tank, that's full of sewage sitting out in the yard, it's going to go anytime we clean the pipes, it'll then go straight into the plant influent where all the other residential sewage comes, get treated immediately and go through the process of the plant. So there's an operational benefit savings. We'll be able to clean more sewer lines with less staff time. We'll also be eliminating this, this tank full of sewage that kind of sits in the yard, and the cost of disposal. So we will no longer have to truck and pay Casella and the trucking company to dispose of these solids. So there's a lot of benefits to it. It's really important to us. We've been working on it for about 1.5 years. So I'd ask that you consider approving that.
Any other questions that the council has? Or the public? Go ahead. Yeah, if you would come up and use the microphone.
I'm just wondering what the additional gallons per week would be. Would you anticipate that are going to go into the waste treatment plant?
I think it's going to be a relatively low number. So we need to clean the sewer pipes regardless. We may be able to do an extra 50,000 gallons a week because we're more efficient. But again, this is residential wastewater, so it's the same characteristics of the waste that's coming into the plant now, and we're eliminating it, sort of sitting untreated on site. So there may be some small increase because we're more efficient, but you're eliminating this open vessel of wastewater on site.
Okay. So Linda, if you have more questions, if you could ask them all together, and then.
I do understand some of it.
Yeah, so go ahead but from here again. Okay, thank you. Yes.
So if I'm understanding, there'll be an additional, instead of it being outside, it's going to go inside the plant, which it hasn't done before. Is that correct, or I'm misunderstanding?
So the solids will go through the plant, which were historically trucked to the landfill.
Okay.
Until they go through the treatment process, we still pull the solids out through the treatment plant, and they eventually go to the landfill.
Okay.
But it'll just be sort of a different path.
But the liquids have always gone into the plant, so there's no additional liquids going into the plant?
Other than our efficiency getting a little better and maybe cleaning more sewer lines than we do now because we're under cleaning, a small increase in liquids potentially, but it's a very small amount, and a lot of it is water that we use to actually clean the pipes. So it's not actually wastewater.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, is there a motion? Oh, Donna, go ahead.
Just related to this, there were some other questions that we passed on to you from Linda. Are you answering those directly to her, or is it going to be brought up later on, if not covered now?
Yep. So I have a presentation planned as part of tonight's meeting. And my thought was I would answer those questions at the end of that presentation.
Great, thank you. All right, is there a motion? Jack?
I move that we approve item G, the Vector pad and walls proposal.
Okay, motion and a second. Further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, thank you.
Anything you do to reduce odor. This is really important.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a couple of proclamations to make. The first item is both related to baseball. So we have the Bud Fowler proclamation and the James Lee Cat proclamation. I don't know if anyone's here to represent either the Mountaineers, with us digitally or in person that wants to speak to that? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. I do think it's probably worth mentioning the Bud Fowler proclamation. Very cool. Bud Fowler was the first Black professional ball player in America. So very cool and great to be recognizing him. And then James Lee Catt, recognizing him for his support of our hometown team and well-deserved election to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Is there a motion regarding that?
I move we approve both of these resolutions. I think it's a great thing.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Okay, the next is a proclamation declaring first Friday in June to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And when we put this item on the agenda, the shooting in Buffalo had happened, but the shooting in Uvalde had not. And it just seems, it's just heartbreaking that this is so relevant. And I am just even personally frustrated, angry about the situation there, and in Buffalo, in Uvalde, and in all of the places that have experienced mass shootings, since they've existed. And if you are feeling similarly, I would encourage you to get in touch with your legislators and let them know that where we're at with gun legislation is not sufficient, that we need to have better gun laws in Vermont. Besides that, we're also declaring the first Friday in June, June 3rd, National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and to wear orange to recognize that. Anything other folks would like to say about that? Actually, before we do a vote, I would actually like to have a moment of silence. But let's, if you have comments, let's do that now.
Public comments?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Connor Casey, wearing my Gun Sense Vermont hat here. I'm going to recuse myself from this vote just because I helped draft the proclamation. Obviously, this was drafted before the two horrific mass shootings in the last week here. And, I think the information we had today shows that, Buffalo, the supermarket could be Shaw's, the Robb Elementary School, that could be any of our schools here in Vermont. So it's easy to say it happens another place, but gun violence happens everywhere. We have 80 Vermonters a year who lose their lives from gun violence here. It's one thing to spike the football if we pass a few good bills or something, but it really needs to be a culture change in our gun-obsessed country. 110 Americans die every day. Hundreds more are wounded here. And I think just, the thoughts and prayers, this proclamation is good, but it's not worth the paper it's written on unless we have meaningful action that backs that up, more than we've ever done before here. And really, every level of government has a part to play. There's a lot of cowardice being shown in DC right now. What we passed was wildly insufficient to the State House this year as far as closing the Charleston loophole. And I learned, and some of the other gun safety advocates learned, was we have in statute what's called the Sportsman's Bill of Rights that pretty much preclude municipalities from passing any ordinances around guns. Burlington found this out, when they tried to expand their extreme risk protection order. So what Gun Sense is going to be doing over the next few months is engaging municipalities to contact the State House and say, repeal the Sportsman's Bill of Rights. Who else has a Bill of Rights like this, that they're immune from having communities pass something that directly impacts their health and safety here? So again, I think the best we can do is proclamations like this. And I really want to thank Moms Demand Action, the other group in Vermont who's really taking the lead on this. But again, the words are meaningless unless we back it up afterwards. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Steve Whitaker, I think that I'm supportive of the proclamation that we need better gun control, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we've had one person killed by a bad guy in Montpelier and 2 people killed by our police. And it was an error of our own system of not looking at the dispatch record for a mentally distressed person before we allowed one of our officers to put 2 fragmentation rounds from a safe distance where he was at no risk of the pellet pistol in his hand. So gun violence happens both by the good guys and the bad guys, and we have swept it under the rug, especially with Mayor, you're not noticing the public hearing and holding it at 7th on the agenda at the following meeting and calling that all the community healing that was needed. That was a farce.
Thank you. Any further comment? Okay. Nothing from council and nothing online. All right. Yes, Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really glad this is on the agenda. I know it's been a really hard day for me and for many of us. And my heart just goes out to these communities, these families who are suffering so much, our school staff and our children here in Montpelier and across the country. I know I held my 11 and 7-year-old extra tight. I know there are also a lot of great resources on processing this grief, talking to children. I'm happy to send some to the city. I don't know if there's some place to post those, but unfortunately, because we've been through this so many times, there's a lot of, really helpful resources out there. So I'll be happy to share those in case we can make those available to people in the community. And just, echo that we need federal action, we need state action, contact your legislators. We need to grieve, but we also need to act. And there's so much more we can do to have stronger gun safety legislation. So I hope this can at least translate into some better laws to protect more children and more lives across our country. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I also want to note that the city does have a social worker. And so, as people are processing the last week, the last 24 hours, if you need to talk with someone, then we do have a city social worker who is available to everyone. So everyone is welcome to get in touch with our social worker. And so if any other further comments, if you would, I would just like to take just a few moments here in a moment of silence, just to remember the victims from Uvalde, Buffalo, and around the country. Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion regarding the proclamation?
I move we adopt the proclamation.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, and you're abstaining, yep. Thank you. All right. And so now we're moving on to an appointment to the Capitol Complex Commission with the application of Tim Center, who I do not see online, nor do I see here in person with us. Is there a motion? Yes, Jack.
I move we appoint Tim Center to be the city representative to the Capitol Complex Commission.
Okay. And
I'll second that.
okay, there's a motion and a second.
I also have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
In all my years at city council, I don't remember this coming up.
Oh, really?
And I, at one point, when I was in public transit, was a member on this commission, and it was very active at one point. And I don't remember any reports from anybody. So can you give me some background? Thank you, Phil.
Sure. So the city has one rep on the Capital Complex Commission. The rest are appointed by the governor. And for a long time, it was someone from the Planning Commission, and then they lost interest. So for a very long period of time, Paul Carnahan was our representative, and then he recently stepped down, and then Mr. Center has stepped up. Typically their only real job, they're essentially design review for the Capitol Complex. Our design review doesn't extend into the Capitol Complex district, so they perform that function and look over buildings and projects and that kind of thing. So I don't know that there would be a report to us per se, as much as they react to proposals and things that either BGS puts forward or somebody who owns a home within the district wants to do something. Someone if you own a home in the district and you want to change your porch, you've got to go to them instead of our design review district. So,
Well, I guess I'm looking at them as one way to help them reduce their parking lots, and likewise, perhaps to work with us on some issues, because that's when I was on, when we were dealing with the first time before Taylor Street multi-center transportation center it was going to be dealing with some state parking issues, city issues, and so it came through that commission.
So there was a city-state commission that had a slightly different focus. So that was specifically to deal with buildings and transportation and parking in the Capitol Complex. And there were 4 representatives from the city and 4 from the state, and I think maybe someone from transit, which may have been you.
Can we use this a little bit more like that? I'm just trying to have.
This is established by statute, and its duties and responsibilities are pretty clear. The city-state commission at some point expired. It was also set up by statute, and it expired. It was but the whole One Taylor project did go through that city-state commission and was blessed by them and approved by them, as well as the Capital District Master Plan that we still refer to. But it was different than this Capital Complex commission.
I understand that. I'm glad you're giving me the 2 different titles, because I forgot what the other one was named. I guess I would hope that maybe, because I look at parking and I look at bathrooms, and I'd like to have a place where we could have somebody always there talking about it and inserting it, not just going to the buildings administration. That's all.
Fair enough.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you for making those 2. An additional one is regional communications. I attended one of the meetings of this commission, and one of the senators made a point that the Capitol Police communications needed to be integrated in with the regional Central Vermont Public Safety Communications planning. And y'all have subverted that, but that's still the fact that this person, all their personal details are blacked out and there's no exemption claimed. It makes it hard. If he's supposedly representing me on this commission, I should be able to reach him. So I don't understand why you blacked out all his contact information on the application. But accountability and transparency is key here, as is the opportunity to vet this person for their views on public restrooms and radio communications, et cetera.
So to be clear, this commission has nothing to do with any of those.
All right. Thank you. Is there a motion? Oh, there is a motion on the table. Further discussion? Okay, and not seeing anyone online. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 And opposed? Okay. Thank you. All right. So we are up to the USDA grant public hearing. So I'm going to officially open the public hearing, but I think I'm also probably inviting Kurt back up to the table. I imagine.
Right. Yes. Well,
Yes.
Kurt's coming up. I'll just say that the grant public hearing is a requirement, and then for the funding. And then we also wanted to provide you a project update, as was due, and Ms. Berger had also requested some information, so we'll try to address all of those. And by we, I mean Kurt. We'll try to address all of these through their presentation.
And I'm sort of assuming that this is a combination of 9 and 10
Yes.
on the agenda. Okay.
What did you do?
Okay. Where's your PowerPoint?
If it sees it from over there, I will be shocked. We usually have to. So when you just go down to the Zoom and hit share screen and then just hit the first bucket, I'm gonna go give you permission, just hit the first bucket because the other buckets will mess up the computer. You can try now. Share the screen.
Okay, Kurt Monica, Deputy Director of Public Works. And this is the public presentation for the Water Resource Recovery Facility Phase 2 project and the East State Street Reconstruction project. This is a requirement for USDA funding that we conduct a public hearing. And I'm also going to take the opportunity to provide some updates on where we're at with these two projects. So I will jump right into it. So the items that we'll be covering tonight is the biosolids drying project at the Water Resource Recovery Facility, the benefits of the two projects, other plant upgrades that are planned, preliminary cost estimates, an update on the odor status of the odor control at the plant, and an update on where we're at with the East State Street Reconstruction project. So for the biosolids drying, when I last spoke with council, we were moving in the direction of an indirect hot water belt dryer. So belt dryer, there's two paths of waste at the plant. The first is the liquid stream, and the second is the solid stream. This is specific to the solid stream, so we separate the solids from the liquids as they come into the plant, both through the pipeline, the collection system, as well as hauled waste is trucked to the plant. And the goal of this, the intent of this project, is to reduce disposal costs associated with those solids. Currently, all of the solids from the plant go to the landfill. So as I mentioned earlier, we were looking at initially a hot water belt dryer, which is basically utilizing methane, heating up a hot water loop, and then running that hot water through sort of this kind of associate it like a pizza oven, but it really uses dehumidification to dry the solids. And some of the benefits of that process is that you can run it unstaffed, and it would utilize the methane through hot water boilers. This technology has been around for a long time, so it has a proven history. And once it goes through this process, you have what's called a Class A biosolid, which means all the pathogens in the solids have been destroyed. The new development, this is the update, is that our consulting engineer asked if we would be interested in evaluating gasification as an alternative to the hot water belt dryer. And this has some, very exciting benefits. The first is that the fuel source actually uses the solids, the waste material, and it burns it, and that's kind of what is used to heat this unit. So instead of methane, we would use the methane sort of to start the process, but once it starts going, you're able to actually use the solids for the heating source. It has a little bit higher maintenance than the belt dryer. but it's still relatively low compared to some other technologies like paralysis, which is something else we took a high level look at. But it does need to have staffed operations while it's running. It's relatively new compared to the belt dryer. And really sort of the biggest, most exciting component of this is that it has the ability to destroy PFAS and PFOA down to levels, what's classified as, what they're classifying as total destruction of 2 parts per billion, which is really kind of the level of which it can be accurately measured. And so this product also has a further reduction of solids disposal over the belt dryer. And you can use it to create a biochar material. So it's another step up from a Class A material. It has a higher value, less concern with environmental impacts. This is an overall site layout. The red on the left is where either one of these equipment would be installed. We would need conveyors to move the material back to our what we call the garage building in order to haul the waste. And just kind of high level economics of these two alternatives. There is maintenance downtime. So that first line is when we're not able to operate this machinery or this equipment, it will be just dewatered. So it's just goes through our what we call our screw presses, and then we go to the landfill. That's a relatively short downtime that we're anticipating, but there's a disposal cost associated with that. And then managing the dried byproduct, slightly lower in the gasification unit. Supplemental fuel oil, we don't expect to have 100% available methane to run the belt dryer, so we're carrying some cost of oil for that. Electrical demand is about the same for the 2 units. Maintenance is higher in the gasification compared to the belt dryer, and overall operating costs annually is slightly higher in the gasification unit. And then you add in debt service, and they're very close, and we're still refining this. This is a slide from a draft preliminary engineering report from our engineer. So I expect these numbers will be even closer once we work through all the details. But as you can see, in either case, we expect that it would be a lower cost compared to solids disposal that we are currently utilizing, bringing everything to the landfill. But right now, it's slightly higher cost for the gasification, but has a lot more environmental benefits. So just to expand on some of the benefits of both of these projects, is East State Street and the wastewater biosolids drying project. Allows for a more stabilized disposal cost, lower trucking emissions, potential beneficial use of the end product as opposed to landfilling it all. Now we have the potential in PFAS and PFOA destruction. And for the East State Street project, it addresses probably the largest remaining combined storm and sewer connection that we have in the city. So we're expecting a significant reduction in overflow events from this project. Of course, East State Street includes a full road rebuild, so we'll have a much improved travel conditions, a Class 2 roadway, relatively high traffic. And we're also replacing the water and sewer pipes on East State Street, so more reliable utilities. And East State Street is actually one of the locations where we've had a high number of water leaks. So in addition, we'll be reducing staff demand for repairs. Other projects associated with the water resource recovery facility is the secondary clarifiers. So under the phase 1 project, we replaced essentially or upgraded essentially all of the equipment except for the secondary clarifiers. So that will be included in the phase 2. It's critical to meeting our effluent water quality requirements. And the other component is odor control. As mentioned earlier, the city did receive a notice of alleged violation from the Air Quality Division, and so we are under order to take corrective action on the odors from the plant. So this is a timeline of what we've done to date with regard to odor control. On November 5th is when we received the notice of alleged violation from the state. They had some very tight timelines in the initial notice. So we asked them for extension, partly because the characteristics of the odors change seasonally. In the summertime, we take in a lot more hauled waste. And so we wanted the opportunity to right size equipment, take samples in the summertime when we have, the high loadings at the plant, so that we make sure that we get the equipment size right. Following up with that, on January 12th, we had the manufacturer of our existing odor control unit do a site visit to assess that equipment. We only have one piece of equipment on the facility currently that is intended for odor control, and it is really only it's only connected to the headworks building. That's where the trucked waste is received, as well as the septage and leachate tanks. So that's kind of the only areas it currently serves. We do expect there's other areas. Well, we do know, we have verified, in fact, that there's other areas in the plant that need to be addressed for odor control. On January 25th, that firm gave us their results and some options for a temporary rehabilitation of the odor control unit. Shortly after that, on February 3rd, the city asked Energy System Groups, who is our engineer for the phase 1 project, for some recommendations or assistance in dealing with what's called the blend tank. It's where the received waste gets mixed. Our operators had noticed that when they were working up there above the blend tank, that there was a very strong odor coming from where the mixer connects into the tank. And we learned that that required a special lubricant to seal the space between the mixer and the tank. And since then, we have corrected that. So there's one short-term measure that has already been implemented. Following the BioRem proposal, we asked our consulting engineer to review the recommendations and provide some feedback. They were concerned that the proposal would result in an undersized unit because we didn't have data from the summer months. Again, this was in February. So we put that proposal on hold until we could do additional sampling. On March 7th, we conducted that additional sampling. We did it facility-wide. We looked at the dewatering building. We looked at the septage tank that wasn't sampled under the BioRem proposal. And we found that the septage tank is by far the highest levels of hydrogen sulfide, which is the primary contributor to odors, which really wasn't identified in that initial round of sampling. So it just kind of confirmed that the seasonal impacts are significant. In April 15th, Brown and Caldwell provided some alternatives for a skid mounted carbon filter that we could use at the headworks. We looked at potentially renting as opposed to purchasing. The issue is with the temporary skid is the media life for the sizing you can get for those is very short, maybe 6 months at best, and then you have to replace the media. That media cost is about $40,000 for each round of change out, as well as staff and labor time. So we're still evaluating the best alternative. We think for the headworks, a biofilter unit is the better option as opposed to a skid mounted charcoal filter. We think for the dewatering building, the best option is going to be the charcoal skid. And in addition, we are, as a short-term measure, we are planning to implement chemical treatment into the septic tank, which has those very, very high levels of hydrogen sulfide. So that's essentially our short-term plan, is to currently do chemical addition in the septic tank. And we still need, so tonight on the consent agenda, you just passed our amendment with our consulting engineer to do a full design evaluation, right sizing of equipment. Currently, we're not comfortable without doing, a fair amount of additional engineering with sizing the equipment. So there's still more work to do. There's more sampling to do, air sampling that is, before we really feel like we're comfortable moving forward with a purchase or rental of equipment. And I know that there's additional questions on this, but I will, I will go through the questions that I've received from the resident, Ms. Berger, at the end of the presentation, and we can, if there's a follow-up from that, I can answer them at that time. And this is, so for East State Street, we're proposing to break the project into 2 contracts. This is what the limits of what we're proposing on contract 1. If you can see my cursor here, this is Main Street, State Street on the left out to the Rialto Bridge, where the north branch of the river, where it crosses the north branch of the river. And on the right-hand side is East State Street. So the goal of the phase 1 contract is to separate the stormwater out of the sewer system, so we get the immediate benefit of the CSO reduction. We have been informed that we will be receiving a $1.2 million grant through the ARPA. Not officially received the grant agreement yet, but told it's coming. And what we expect that this work will be primarily done trenchless, which means either boring the pipe underground or hammering the steel sleeve underground. The reason for that is that in order to get under all the utilities on Main Street, we need to be very, very deep. And so it's just not economical to open cut, traditional excavate and install pipe at depths of 12 feet or more. One additional component of this project is that that box on State Street is what's called a vortex separator. So that will take the first 1-inch storm and separate out the sediment, so to improve water quality before it discharges to the river. The phase 2 contract is much bigger. It spans from the intersection of Main Street all the way up to College Street. It's going to include full replacement of all the water and sewer pipes. It will provide for new sidewalks with a new stabilized roadway. And we also plan to do some work in the parking lot that connects from Harry Sheridan. That's where we're proposing to put the snow melting system in through district heat, as well as some additional stormwater retention facilities. We are planning to do the design for East State Street, both contract 1 and contract 2 in-house. We recently hired an engineer from the firm that was doing the initial engineering, and that firm has since closed. So it seemed like the logical choice for us to move forward in-house. One last point is that there will be some additional public hearings for how we handle the streetscape, competing interests in bike lanes versus trees or additional sidewalks, and we'll present some options when we get into final design and present that to council. So just to touch on the schedule, right now for the water resource recovery facility, we're expecting to start next summer and with completion in the fall of 2024. We hope to allow for pre-purchase of equipment because there are some very long lead times right now. For East State Street, we're hoping to start this fall on contract 1. that is very dependent on state review, which so far we have not heard any comments back. We submitted our preliminary engineering report in March, as well as our environmental review documents, and have not heard comments. So if we're hoping to build that this year, but it's unknown for sure at this point. And then contract 2, we hope to start next spring, complete in the fall of 2024. So that's a 2-year project. Some of the challenges we're facing, the water resource recovery facility, it's a very complicated, high amount of engineering, technical engineering required for that with a lot of different disciplines. And we're also looking at emerging technologies. So we're trying to, vet out the best option of how we move forward. USDA funding requires that they review and approve the engineering reports. As part of that funding condition, American iron and steel requirements need to be met for construction. As I mentioned, we're seeing really long review times, likely because of the amount of money that's being put out through the federal government for infrastructure. Urban soils, we need to classify contaminants in any project basically within city limits is considered urban soil. We need to do testing and then determine how that soil needs to be managed. It's not something that we're very familiar with, but it's something that we need to address on the East State Street project. As I mentioned, we're doing in-house design work on East State Street. And in July 1st, there's new stormwater regulations where anything over half an acre of disturbed, which East State Street falls under, will require a stormwater permit. It's called an operational permit, which sort of stays with the street in perpetuity. Excuse me. So just a quick note on the funding breakdown. The solids project comes out to about $11.6 million with engineering. Secondary clarifiers is $1.8 million estimated with engineering, and the odor control system is $3 million. So total estimated project cost for the water resource recovery facility is $16.4 million. And for East State Street, contract 1, we're looking at a $1.2 million construction cost. Contract 2 is estimated at $6 million construction cost. We are anticipating some increase due to inflation. We'll work through that as we know more when our construction dates will be. So the total for East State Street is currently estimated at $7.2 million, and the total project cost for both that we're asking USDA to fund is $23.6 million. And then the funding breakdown for these projects, as noted, USDA grant loan option is our primary funding. For the design work, we are getting subsidies through the State of Vermont Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund. Generally for any work related to clean water, it's a 50% subsidy on design. We have applied for a pollution control grant for the solids handling related work at the water resource recovery facility. I mentioned the $1.2 million anticipated ARPA grant for East State Street. And we likely will need to do short-term financing through our local bond bank in order to start the projects. So now I get into questions, and I can go through, if we want to start with general questions first from council, and then I can follow up with the written questions. You want to do those first? Okay. All right, the first question I received was in regard to the factor dump station. I believe we've addressed that one. We'll move on to the second question. It says, in the BioRem report, page 2 noted that the upstream characteristics changed considerably since the original design and installation of the odor control equipment, in part due to the high strength organic waste being received in batches. And then it's noted leachate. So It is true that the BioRem report noted that the characteristics have changed. It's not related to the leachate though. It's related to the high strength organic waste, which is essentially food waste that's being trucked in. So grease, dairy, that sort of waste. The original odor control unit, the media inside it is essentially wood chips. And that's really meant for septage treatment, not for organic waste, food waste. So really, it's not a good system currently for dealing with the hauled high strength organic waste, and that is part of our study that we will replace that unit with a much larger unit with a different type of media that can handle that odor treatment. Question number 3 is the absorption system BioRem is proposing is particularly suited for low concentration applications, which we do not have. Has the system they are proposing for us been successfully used elsewhere? What are the concentrations in the system, and will we potentially need multiple absorption systems? So the first question is, has it been used successfully elsewhere? The answer is yes. These types of systems are in place. And will we need multiple types of treatment? That's also true. We will need we'll need one unit for the headworks and the septage tank and what we call the mixing tank. We expect one unit to serve those 3 areas. We'll need a separate unit for the dewatering building. And then we also expect that potentially we'll be continuing to do chemical treatment in the septage to reduce those hydrogen sulfide levels, which would in turn expand the media life. Question number 4, are we still receiving leachate from the CV landfill? So it comes from the Coventry landfill, and we actually are not currently taking leachate for a couple of reasons. It's not related to odors, it's related to one, primarily is that we had an E. coli violation at the plant, and we decided as staff that until we really can understand why that occurred. So let me back up a little bit. First, as soon as we received the E. coli violation, we stopped accepting leachate. And we decided that it was best to wait until really spend some time determining how the leachate is impacting the ultraviolet disinfection system before we allow it to be returned to the plant. That's the primary reason. The secondary reason is the state of Vermont has just told us that we will be under an ammonia limit under our next discharge permit. And we have asked our engineer to do a high-level study on how much of the ammonia entering the plant is contributed from leachate. So there's 2 parts that we're looking at: is the impact on UV and the impact of ammonia at the plant. So that's in the works, but right now we are not receiving leachate. Question number 5. Well, that's exactly what we're evaluating for those 2 limits, or if there's changes needed. Yeah, sorry. So the follow-up question was, how much leachate are we taking, and how much can our existing and upgraded plant safely and effectively handle? So before we stopped taking leachate, we were taking about 170,000 gallons per week. Generally, we hadn't had issues historically until we got this E. coli violation. And so that led us to take a step back and determine, exactly how the leachate is impacting the UV disinfection. So I would say that, that historically we can, successfully treat leachate, but we had this issue and we're taking the time to evaluate, why that happened. Question number 5 is, Brown and Caldwell is developing a plan for short-term remediation efforts for odor control. The city's indicated that the cost will be a factor in whether or not the city utilizes these. Should cost be a factor when negative health and public nuisance impacts are considered? And then a follow-up on the Vector dump station. So I think the most important part is that when we spend money on solutions that they are effective. And so right now we're spending a fair amount of money on really evaluating the odors. So the Brown and Caldwell contract on tonight's agenda, I think, was around 83,000. We've spent about 10,000 or so dollars on testing odors so far, with more to come. So I don't think we've gotten to the point where we really know what the best solution is, other than, as I mentioned, implementing chemical addition to treat the hydrogen sulfide in the septic tank. So I will follow with that. We do plan to do that short-term measure within the next month. So now that we have approved contract with Brown and Caldwell, that's the very first thing we're going to ask them to provide recommendations on is what type of chemical should we use, and at what rate should it be added to that tank.
You said short term. What does that mean? Short term solution.
So because the upgrade is 2 years out before it's completed, we want to do something now to help resolve the issue.
But it will help as long as you use it, and then you'll decide something else. It isn't that it's only good for so long.
Correct. It's more of an immediate action rather than long-term equipment. Okay. The next question I had from this morning, or it was, what is the weekly amount of landfill leachate and local high-strength organic waste from the 7 local food processors and haulers that the plant currently receives? So as I mentioned earlier, it was about 170,000 gallons a week of leachate. That is currently 0. And for the high-strength organic waste, it's around 50 to 60,000 gallons per week.
Excuse me, but Kurt, when you get the E. coli situation resolved, will you be going back to taking the leachate?
Yes, we do plan to, unless there's a red flag through the engineering evaluation. The next question was, the cost of carbon is skyrocketing. What is the estimated cost of maintenance and replacement of the carbon medium in the vessels or digesters, if that ends up being a component of the final design? And when do you anticipate that design being finalized? So we don't have a perfect number on the media replacement, other than we had a proposal on a temporary skid to go to Headworks, and we did get some high-level cost estimates on replacing media in that unit. That is the carbon unit. It was estimated at $40,000 every 6 months. The design, that we don't have an exact schedule on that. We're still in preliminary engineering right now. That has to be then approved from the funding agencies. We have to develop a final design contract, which then has to be approved by the funding agency, and before we can start final design in order to get the subsidies. But I would say, early next year, we hope to be into final design, and probably, maybe midwinter, hopefully we'll have some solutions, but I don't have an exact date for that. The next question was, the BC team noted incomplete air quality testing from BioRem. will nationally accepted standards of air quality testing be required by the city? Are the workers in the plant breathing safe air? So first I did have to call our engineer on this one. There is not a nationally accepted air standard at wastewater plants. There's best practices, there's rules of thumb, but there's not a national standard. At least that was what our engineer informed me. As far as our workers breathing safe air, yes, a big part of the phase 1 contract was to improve the air quality within the buildings. There's a certain amount of air exchanges you need per hour in order to declassify those areas so that all the equipment doesn't have to be explosion proof. And we also put in extensive air monitoring systems in the plant to make sure that the air is safe there. And then the last question is A&R and DEC provided grant funding for treatment plant upgrades. This is the same agency that monitoring for the city's compliance with corrective actions they're requiring. So the plant meets air quality, health, and public nuisance standards. Is this a potential conflict of interest situation? And has the city received a response from DEC on the progress update sent on May 2nd? I don't see, so the grant we got from A&R for the phase 1 project was called the pollution control grant. They are part of A&R DEC, but it's a whole separate division. And so I don't see a conflict in them. I mean, they issued the enforcement action on the city for air quality. So I don't see that, historical grant funding is impacting their actions. As far as a response from the state on my update, I have not received one, but I don't expect to receive one. It's generally not a back and forth. It's the city, reporting on what we've done to date, and they log that. Us submitting the update, was part of that violation response requirement, and we've done that. So I wouldn't expect them to be, partaking in a back and forth on that. And that is all the questions, unless there are follow-ups.
Linda, I know you have some questions. Do you think you can ask them all sort of together? That would be wonderful. Go ahead. But if you would come up and use the microphone, that would be great. Thank you.
The gasification.
Speak right into
Sorry,
the
was
microphone.
Brown and Caldwell, the engineering firm that recommended the gasification process.
Yes, they recommended that we look into that. And I also should know, I forgot to mention that the gasification unit will have its own odor control component built in with it. Either that or the belt dryer, they both would include odor control.
And the only other thing I had was in terms of air quality standard testing, maybe it's not a national standard, but there's a broad list of air quality tests. Will you broaden the list of air quality tests that you're doing in the plant? Because in one of the reports, there wasn't the information to be able to respond.
Yes, absolutely. So we have done quite a broad spectrum of air testing already, and there's more to come now that we have the approved engineering contract.
And I had one question about the snow removal. Like, will the water from the snow go directly into the river, or is there a holding system or for dealing with that water?
So that has not been designed yet, but the intent is trash screening. So it'll be basically the snow melting system would consist of a 3-sided concrete structure with heating pipes from the Montpelier's district heat system running through the concrete to heat it up. The city trucks would back up to the snow, this melting system, and dump into it. The trash would be screened, and then the water would be piped into the sewer system so that the chlorides, the salts, could be treated at the plant.
Thank you. I have so many thoughts, and I so appreciate all of this information. I find this stuff fascinating, actually. And so I have a lot to say, but I'm going to hold off and see if there's questions from the council. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a few questions. I'm sure you're shocked. No, it's great to see you again, Kurt. Thanks for all that information. Just on the kind of looking at the options between the dryer and the gasification, could you just talk a little bit about what the use of the biosolids that would be from the dryer system versus the biochar from the gasification? Like, what could those be used for, assuming they still would be, I would think, have some chemical contamination of some kinds in them? So just how might they be used as an end product?
So currently in Vermont, I believe Class A material can be field applied, can be land applied for crops not intended for direct human consumption. So they could go on crops for farm feed. That is likely to change, expecting some further regulation on Class A, largely due to the PFAS and PFOA issue. But right now it's allowed. And the other thing that we've been talking about is potentially using it for topsoil amendment, for potentially state projects. But again, there's the PFAS considerations. The biochar is the gasification process actually breaks up the carbon chains of the PFAS. And so it's essentially, it's destroyed as my understanding. And in addition to that, even the pharmaceuticals are basically broken up to a point where it's no longer a concern. So the biochar could conceivably be used for any soil amendment, including human consumption. The topsoil, all the other things that the Class A material could be used for, also obviously be available for the biochar. Biochar has expanded options. You can use it for dye and clothing, or there's a long list of things. I don't have everything available right now, but certainly get more information on that.
Thanks. I just would definitely be concerned if we were putting biosolids, using that for land application. Maine just banned the application of sludge. I imagine Vermont's going in that direction. I think putting it on, the farms in Maine in particular have seen so much, these generational farms that are now destroyed because the PFAS levels are so high in the soil and there's nothing they can do about it. So us contributing to that in any way seems like a bad way to go. I think there are uses of biosolids that can be put on kind of more already contaminated sites or things. I think there could very well be ways to use it that would not kind of contribute to other environmental problems. I know you're thinking about that, but just to say it, for the gasification, I'm part of a lot of conversations about the evolving technologies to destroy PFAS. The only thing I've seen, and actually just the last couple of days, was something called plasma gasification, which is like the first time that they've actually felt confident that maybe there's this technology that could do it. A lot of the traditional gasification, which is essentially like incineration, right? Does not necessarily destroy it. You have to be operating, even in the best case scenario. If it does, the system has to be operating perfectly. Otherwise, you're getting byproducts. And then if you're, putting them out, they could end up contaminating the community in other ways. So I would just be wanting to make sure that that's not going to be, a possibility with anything we would move forward with. One question I had, I'm glad to hear temporarily we've stopped taking the leachate. I know, we've been looking for a while at whether we should continue taking the leachate. Are there other, we had talked about the revenue implications of that. Are there other implications on the plant? I know just the balance of different types of waste you need to take and stuff is tricky. Are there other impacts you've seen that we would need to be aware of if council decided in the future to decide not to take leachate for the longer term?
So the financial impacts from not accepting leachate is one, the revenue that we charge to take it, but the other one is the increased disposal cost of the solids. So right now, all of our solids go to the landfill, and we get we get essentially half what most places pay for solids disposal. So our solids disposal costs would, essentially double potentially.
Just a couple more. Is just on the leachate, is there an update on what's been happening with the pilot project for the pre-treatment of the leachate in case we do start taking it again?
Yep. So I did reach out to ANR, and they suggested that Casella come directly and update council. So that is planned for the next council meeting.
Oh,
Casella is
great.
going to join us for that.
Great. And I might ask them this too, but just my last question. Has the city been looking at all into, and I don't know if this could tie into the project that you were walking through, but I know that there was specific money for wastewater treatment facilities to address contamination from chemicals like PFAS in the infrastructure bill. So the state got money to install like filtration systems, which I would think Montpelier should be top of the list for Vermont's pot of money if we're going to be the site of leachate off-taking. So is that something that could be, is that exploration happening? Would that fit into what's already being done? Is that part of this project and I missed it? Or just any thoughts on how that might be a possibility?
Yeah, certainly a possibility. It's not currently part of the project. It could be added in. I did hear from Casella this week, and they've asked the city to co-sponsor a grant application for them to build their pre-treatment system on leachate. I haven't seen that grant opportunity come out specific to wastewater treatment plants, but if you see that, please pass it along. I have not yet.
Yeah, I think it was part of that infrastructure bill that there's not even final guidance on. So I'm guessing it will come out in the next year or so. But if we're doing this planning and engineering, it might be worth some conversations, but maybe we can ask ANR about that next time they're in. Thanks, Kurt.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a question. I just want to express my appreciation for the comprehensive and very detailed presentation.
So I have do you have a comment?
No,
Yeah.
well, I would second that. I'm glad there are people like you on the show.
Yes. So I have a few questions. So in terms of the hot water belt dryer versus the drum dryer and gasifier alternative, so these, I just want to make sure I'm understanding where we're at with that. So these are both methods that we're considering that, like, we wouldn't do both of these things. We would do one or the other, right?
Correct.
And you're at this point, am I correct in assuming that you're still investigating both of them and you don't necessarily have a recommendation for us as to which, like, one is better at this point? Or are you recommending the dryer are you recommending one at this point?
No.
Okay. And okay. So also in terms of the funding, just thinking about the most recent bond that we passed, with all of the other potential funding sources that we have available to us, that you mentioned, are those going to, like, I guess basically my question is, do you anticipate using the entirety of the bond that we most recently passed to do this, or and using the funding in addition to that, or does the funding that you talked about potentially eat down the costs below the level of the bond?
Yeah, I mean, the construction climate is more unpredictable than we've ever seen.
Okay.
So it's difficult to say where we're going to land financially. I think if our estimates come in where they're at right now, and when we actually go to construction, I think we would have additional bond capacity unused. But I think it's too early to say that for sure at this point.
Okay. And so you have some engineers looking into both of these options for us right now. What is roughly the timeline for coming back to us with a recommendation?
So that would be prior to final design, once we wrap up all the components of the preliminary engineering.
Which you mentioned.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So, probably late fall, maybe.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
range.
Okay, I just also want to add that, well, okay, have you all been in touch with other gasification plants around the country and how that has worked for them?
Yeah, so that's one of our concerns. It's a relatively new technology. So there are three, to follow up on what Laura mentioned. I didn't know about the plasma one, but there are three that I was aware of. There's pyrolysis, which is the first one we looked at, had a very high construction cost. So that is basically burning the material in absence of air. And there's incineration, which is high air, burning material with a lot of oxygen. And then there is gasification, which is low oxygen burning of materials. So they're all, basically incineration, but with different mixtures of oxygen going into the system. So there aren't any active that we're aware of. We went to Chris and I, the chief operator, went to Pennsylvania to meet with another community that is looking at the same process. We've also heard that there's going to be one being built in Washington State, which we if we have time, we would like to go look at that one. That one will be constructed, before we would get to construction. I think they're about to start. So yeah, it's all really new. That's why we need more time to really evaluate that alternative and make sure it's right for us.
Great. I just want you to know that I'm very interested in the pyrolysis option. I mean, I think from everything I've heard, like the benefits of biochar, it seems really hopeful and really promising. And so I want to recognize that it has its own gravity in terms of, I'm really hopeful that it works, but I also know that I need to stay open to the option that it might not be the right choice for us. So I just want to say that out loud so that you all can help hold me accountable to that. But nonetheless, I am really hopeful about pyrolysis, about biochar, and that option. But I trust your analysis. See what you all come up with. Anything else you have that folks have comments they want to make? Okay, yep, go ahead.
Steve Whitaker. That's a lot of topics into one. With regard to the phase two, it's important to keep in mind that phase one was a $16 million that didn't anticipate a phase two. Now this project has in effect doubled to $32 million. And I'm not saying it's not good work or good design or good analysis, but it's in proportion to where we're neglecting so much other infrastructure in the cities, the conditions of our roads and sidewalks and storm drains. A little kid, a person who just got evicted out of the transit center, fell in the gap on the bridge, on your bike path bridge, multi-million-dollar bike path bridge, fell and ruined her walker because we're not taking care of maintenance. It was 2 years ago that our snowplow damaged the aluminum gap fillers. And I was told last year we were getting steel inserts to fix that. But we've lost sight of the basics that make people safe and comfortable in Montpelier. And we're investing way too much money in these, engineering space moonshots. I note that the bond warning and all the press around the bond warning had already decided a conveyor dryer. So now I'm told we're not necessarily doing the conveyor dryer, we're doing some other technology that may preclude use of the bonded funds without another vote. But I also want to question the idea of using in-house design. Not that our guys aren't capable of it, but it's been in effect, it might be more cost effective to devote our in-house guys to fixing and designing solutions to all these other failed infrastructure projects that have built up over the decades, and hire out an engineering firm to design our East State Street project. I understand that it's a nice way to get the state to pay for half of our staff under that match, but there seems to be enough money around today to focus on getting caught up on some of this stuff. You haven't done this for anybody else. This was an hour-long presentation that I have to comment a bunch of topics on. So the pyrolysis, if that's what you're calling it, incineration is a very imperfect science. And the combustion, I want to commend Lauren for bringing that up, that we could potentially be toying with the idea of spewing PFAS across our, into our school children's lungs and across our gardens, community gardens.
Stephen, you're at 3 minutes, so wrap up your comments, please.
I am the only person you've done that to. These are comments on a different topic, and you're imposing the 2 minutes unfairly on me. So.
And so you're done
I've
now?
learned to expect that from you.
Great. Thank you very much, Stephen. All right. And so does anyone else have comments? And comments online? Anyone online have comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I do want to address one comment that Stephen made, that the first bond did not anticipate phase 2, but that's not accurate. I believe it did. So at this point, there's no more comments about the bond, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to close the public hearing on that. And I think, so there's nothing that you need us to vote on at this point, right? Okay, well, thank you so much, Kurt.
Yeah, thank you.
This is very helpful. Yes, go
I'd
ahead.
just like to thank Linda Berger for her really thoughtful questions too. You know, she lives really near the plant, is very concerned with the odors, and appreciate you staying on top of it. We're trying to keep you informed, and I know you like to have these conversations with the council, and that's great, but I hope you also know you can ask Kurt or I or anybody any questions at any time. I'm happy to get back to you. So we do appreciate your involvement.
I agree. Thank you, Linda. Okay, so now we are up to the Elks Club funding item.
So first of all, before we jump into this too much, I'd like to introduce Josh Jerome to everybody. Josh is our new community and economic development specialist, the artist formerly known as Kevin Casey.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Josh, would you give us a quick little background?
Yeah, sure. I've lived in Montpelier for almost the last 20 years. And my partner and I have 3 teenage girls in the school system, and have worked in Central Vermont in community and economic development for over the last decade. So as a lender with Community Capital Vermont, Berry Partnership as their executive director, and most recently as Randolph's director of economic development. So happy to be back in my hometown, doing what I love to do. And working for the city of Montpelier and you guys.
A lot shorter commute after the meetings.
Absolutely.
And he has really hit the ground running with us on a bunch of things. For this particular issue, I don't think, we haven't planned a presentation. When we last talked to you about the unfolding process with the Elks Club project, we said we would come back to you with a draft RFP and some suggestions for funding. Josh really jumped on it, took the lead on the drafting, which is why he's here. For the funding, I think you can see what we recommended here. I mean, obviously, we don't have a lot of money in our budget other than reallocating, and I think using the 50,000 that we had in for economic development is not a bad idea, just as long as we're clear that we're putting off the economic development strategic plan that we had planned to do that. So we're doing that eyes wide open. And then using the revolving fund and or the trust fund as a loan, so that as we sold future lots or earn income from the property, we would repay it. So essentially fronting the money. Obviously, we may need more next year, but we'd be able to budget for it more properly as we do the budget. But that was really our thought. But we wanted to be sure you had a chance to weigh in or give us any suggestions. It is still all in draft form. And as the key author, we want to make sure Josh heard it firsthand and a chance to introduce himself.
Thoughts or questions from council for Josh? Connor, do you have something?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh yes, Jack, go ahead.
I move that we approve the draft RFP so we can get this thing moving.
Okay, great. Further discussion?
Was that intended to include the funding, recommended funding? Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's really comprehensive. But I'm wondering about the timeline of all of this work, and I'm not sure if I missed it in here because I didn't.
Yeah, there should be a timeline in the RFP. I think it's dated June, and with proposals due back July, review done in August, and October 1st as the start.
I mean, from October 1st on.
There's an 18-month window for planning activities.
Okay, great. So the deliverables are all expected at the end of that 18 months?
Yes.
Do you expect that they may come in along the way, or do you expect that that will all happen at the end of 18 months?
There might be some pieces of it that are known before the end of the 18 months, but a full, complete sort of presentation would be due at the end of the 18 months. Yeah.
Any other thoughts or comments? Lauren.
Nice to meet you. Welcome. I guess my only question was, we had the conversation a couple weeks ago with the hub project, and like, how might that align or not with this? I mean, the timeline certainly is not what they're hoping to see in terms of being able to move forward, which I think this is what it needs to be doing the due diligence and planning and community engagement that we want. But just curious how the city staff is thinking about how we're kind of intersecting with that proposal.
So I'll take this one. Yeah. Let's see. I'm remaining, communication with them. They understand where we're going. They obviously have what they'd like to see. I don't think there's a hard answer for how we're going to handle that. Once we identify the firm or entity that's going to do this work, we can talk to them about, in my head only, we've talked about recreation, open space, and housing. And, maybe as those pods are being sorted out, if the recreation space was determined first, and then we could evaluate how that was going to look, and that was ready to move ahead of some of the others, then we could do that. If it's not, we're kind of betwixt and between with them. I don't think, we're not building our plan around them. They've got an idea. And at some point we'll ask for submittals of ideas, and we'll evaluate their idea along with everyone else's, but we've made no commitments to them as far as partnering. But we've also, I want to be clear once again, is that they had pursued this privately, and we went to them and said, hey, we ought to partner with your project to do a rec project. And then it turned around and came to be, the city owning the property and doing these things. So, they did a lot of legwork to get this going. And so we're trying to keep them in the loop, but also being honest about where we're at.
Any other questions? Yes, Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just kind of following up on that a little bit. I want to make sure that it's really clear to all of us that we're not determining ahead of time what kind of uses will be considered or will not be considered. And I think that's pretty clear in the RFP, but it's not necessarily always so clear as people are sort of casually talking about it. And so I just want to get that out there, say that really clearly, that maybe there will be recreation as a proposed use, maybe there will not be. Maybe there will be housing, maybe there will not be. And this process is to answer those questions,
Yeah.
right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Super. All right. Any further thoughts from anybody? Yes, go ahead.
Peter Kalman, Montpelier. I just have a question because I didn't see the RFP. Bill, what did you mean by where are you borrowing the money in a revolving fund manner? What fund?
We have a community development revolving fund. And we think there's enough money in there, and we would loan ourselves the money and essentially repay it. If it were short, we would obviously, going through the proper process, consider requesting from the Housing Trust Fund, since part of this is potentially to develop housing with repayment, of course. But that has to be approved through that's not part of this motion. That's a future.
Okay, all right. So you might want to go to the Housing Trust.
And we'd have to go through the committee, and we'd have to come to the city council and all that. We can't just read it.
Okay, so my other question is, if we're delaying the economic strategic development plan, which I think is a good idea, but I don't think it's a good idea to continue to refer back to the 2016 plan, which I really think is not applicable to today's Montpelier. And I hope we'll stop referencing that plan and just say there will be a new plan, and the new plan will reflect the realities of today. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll note that the EDSP was not defined in the, Steve Whitaker, was not defined in the city manager's cover sheet for this. So I'm now trying to understand how that fit together. The $60,000 is going to complete this feasibility analysis. I mean, are we going to end up getting out of this a full analysis of whether that railroad track is going to block the traffic volume and make that intersection safe up to state highway standards? Is that included in here? Because I haven't had time to process this one copy, and I should have loaned it to him, you know?
I think we're unsure of at this time. That's why I think Bill mentioned that we might have to seek some additional resources to do that. So the 50,000 gives us a starting point. Of course, we haven't been able to receive any proposals or cost estimates or anything like that. So
yeah, to answer your question, I mean, we're looking at the full feasibility of the project, and that includes any potential obstacles. So to the extent that crossing is an obstacle, and we're not sure it is, but if it is, then obviously that's something that'll have to be identified, and then the part of future project cost to address, along with, water and sewer line, everything else that needs to go into it. So, and to be clear, and by the way, the EDSB is mentioned, but that's beside the point. We're talking about 50,000 from that and another 100,000 from the housing revolving loan fund. So we're talking about 150,000, not just 50. But we're not sure that will be enough, but it should be enough through this fiscal year. It's a pretty extensive project with a lot of design and engineering and analysis that needs to be done, but we won't know for sure until we hear back.
I guess my question relates to whether or not we're assuming that this parcel has to accommodate the rec needs of the city versus if it's not feasible, we'll look at others. The Capital Complex Commission, for instance, can look at liquor control moving their warehouse somewhere else, and that's an ideal spot for a rec center, you know? So I'm wanting to not carve us so deep down into this
Right, so part of this
drive
is,
that we have to drive to get recreation.
understood, part of this is to see if there's a viable project here. If there's not, we can sell the land.
Okay, anyone else in person? Okay, and I am not seeing any hands online, but okay, go ahead, Donna.
I was ready to make a motion.
Oh, I think we have a motion and it's been seconded. That's okay. So any further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, and so we are up to, oh, you know what? Yes, as I say, it is 8:28 and we normally take a break at 8:30. So I think now is the appropriate time to do that. 8:29. All right, so we're going to take a 10-minute break. We will be back at 8:39. again. It is 8:39. All right, so we are jumping back in with an update on the energy, energy information ordinance. And so this was just to update the council on the work that's been done since the ordinance was approved last year or so. There's a number of things that have been done. I guess I'll just talk through this a little bit. So mostly looking under the background information on the cover sheet. So there was education that was done for real estate agents through professional development. And I was told by Ken Jones that he wanted me to relay to you that he is going to continue to do professional development for real estate agents moving forward to help educate them about the tool. And so there's a flyer that's going to be going out in water bills in July as to specifically how to comply, like what steps people would need to follow. We developed an MOU with the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships to clarify questions about data ownership that came up in our previous discussion. There's a certification sheet for buyers and sellers to sign off on to certify that the profile has been provided to the buyer. And then the remainder of this is really about the enforcement. So a sort of a standardized non-compliance letter was developed that would go out to folks who who don't have it posted properly or provided properly. And there's a time for folks to rectify that before a ticket is issued. And then so the enforcement plan was specified as well. So happy to take any questions about that. Yes.
I think just basic, what was it was voluntary for a period, right? What is that period?
Yep. So thank you. And that's actually why we're talking about this now, because it's voluntary through the end of June. So starting to be enforced July 1st.
Gotcha.
Yeah. No. So we wanted to make sure that we had this update before then.
You have a few weeks to be in compliance, Connor.
So in the house.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, go ahead.
I know this is one of your vanity projects, but the public records law does not allow you to just say, you're our contractor, you could keep our data. That you're requiring by ordinance people to submit data to prove compliance with an ordinance. You can't offshore the data like that. So it's real folly to think that you can just tell the company that they own our data because you crafted an MOU. So you needed to hear that and act accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Just so the council is aware, we did have the MOU reviewed by the city's lawyer. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes.
I have one question and then maybe a comment. How many people voluntarily did this?
That's a great question. We don't know of anybody who did voluntarily do it. We know that people and also posted it to their listing, but we know that it can be done.
Okay, so the only comment I would make at this time is that it's a good thing that there aren't very many houses for sale right now so that you can get this working. So my follow-up is, what about new construction? How is that covered by the ordinance? So somebody builds a new house or condominium or whatever. There's no history. How would this work?
So you're saying that somebody.
And it's built and now it's sold by the builder.
Got you. Good question. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So for the ordinance or for the profile to work, you can enter bill data, but you don't have to. It's designed to work based on the assets of the house. That's kind of a fancy way of saying just basically based on the features of the house or the physical attributes of the house, that should be sufficient to get a profile. And that the bill information is supplemental to that. I hope that answers your question. But to be fair, there are, I will leave it there. To be fair, I will be interested in reevaluating this in like another year's time or so to see like how has it gone? What's is it doing what we think it's intended to do? So let's keep watching it. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? And let me just check online here. Not seeing anybody. Okay. And there's no motion, I believe, that is necessary for this. All right, so on to the Housing Task Force report. And I am welcoming up Polly Nickel. Welcome.
Thank you. So Cameron, am I able to show the PowerPoint that I sent?
I didn't get your PowerPoint. Did they?
Oh, Mary said, okay, did you all get it?
Is it in the packet?
Yes.
Okay, well then I will
Okay.
pull it up from the packet.
Great.
No worries. I just didn't get the
Thank you.
actual PowerPoint. Sorry about that. Just a second to maneuver. And I will make it so you can share your item. Sorry about that.
I should have sent you a copy.
It's okay. Is this what you want to share?
No, it looks like this.
That's it. Okay. So if you share it, you can click through it this way. So I'll come right back up and share this.
With this arrow, not the down arrow.
Yes. So hold on
Okay.
just a second. There we go. And I will share the screen so folks at home can see it and we're good to go. So there you go. And those arrows. to move
Okay.
forward.
Well, thank you for giving us the time. I'm here to give you some updates on some things that the task force recommended to you a year ago, and also to update some of the housing data for the city. Oops. Okay, it's not moving. Okay, so population and household composition, this is largely census data from the American Community Survey, but as has been the case for a while, the median household income in Montpelier is higher than the statewide median. We were at $70,000 versus roughly $62,000 statewide. As of 2020, we had 8,074 people and almost 3,900 households. Our households are small, just 1.9 persons per household, and that's actually gone down. So our households are getting smaller, and 24% of the population is over 65, and that has gone up slightly in the past year. 20% of the population is under 18, and the median age is 45. 55% of our population is female, 94% Caucasian, and approximately half of our workforce does not live in Montpelier. So then we looked at rental housing, and
44% of our housing stock is rental, and about 14% of Montpelier households pay more than half of their income for housing. And that's slightly less, very slightly less than the statewide statistic. And the census data says that the median gross rent for Montpelier is $1,169, which is higher than the statewide median of $985. And in 2018, the census said our median rent was $992. But when the census looks at rent, they ask people what they're paying, and that's not what you would have to pay if you went out to rent an apartment in Montpelier. So I went on Craigslist and apartments.com. There were very few listings, especially for apartments, and the median rent was $1,625, and there only were 5 apartments listed. There were a couple single rooms. There was a tiny house, and a very small 1-bedroom apartment that still was renting for quite a bit. Montpelier Housing Authority reports that their voucher holders are having difficulty finding apartments. Those are in privately owned buildings because most of the private landlords have no vacancies. And all of the Montpelier Housing Authority owned and managed apartments are full, except for ones that are in the process of being turned over and ready for someone else. Oops.
It will hopefully rejoin us.
Okay. We know that our rental vacancy rate is extremely low. One of the statistics I saw online was that it's 1.1%, but I honestly don't know how reliable that website is and that statistic, but we definitely have virtually no vacancies. And according to the Housing Authority, a lot of our landlords are older and are thinking about selling. Homeownership. I looked at the property transfers between June of 2021 and February 2022, and the median sales price was exactly $300,000. That includes condos, and they tend to be at the lower end of the market. Most of those were in the 200s, mostly low 200s. The average price was $326,797, but using the median is more accurate because that gives you a better sense. It doesn't get distorted by either a very low figure or a very high figure, as you know. And 20% of the sales were condos, the rest were single family homes. I then went to the MLS listings, and in mid-May, there were 18 listings. Most of those were under contract or with a sale pending, and the median price of the MLS listings for Montpelier was $384,000. According to realtors, the length of time that homes stay on the market has decreased by about 2/3 just since 2020. And as you probably know, we're now seeing a few homes selling for over $1 million in Montpelier, which just would have been inconceivable a few years ago. I just can't believe it. During the past 10 years, our home values have appreciated nearly 44%. And unfortunately, a household earning 120% of median, which is considered like moderate income, can afford a mortgage of approximately $225,000. And that calculation was made before interest rates started going up and before fuel costs started going up so much. So if our median list price is $384,000 and a household of modest means, not even low income, can only afford a mortgage of $225,000, obviously there's a big gap. And I think a concern about who's going to be able to afford to live in this city. The task force hasn't focused a lot on people without homes. But I did go and look at the point in time survey for 2021. This is Washington County data. Montpelier isn't big enough to be broken out separately, but when that survey was done, which I believe was January 2021, there were 327 people without permanent homes in Washington County. Washington County was the third highest in the state. The good news was that nobody was unsheltered who they counted. And I think the 2022 survey information should be coming out soon, but this is the most recent that we have. Of those 327 people, there were 64 children. And most of the people, 310 of the people, were in emergency shelter situations. 17 were in transitional housing. A third of the people were experiencing homelessness for the first time, which sadly means that 2/3 of those people, this wasn't their first go round with being unhoused. And 57 households were characterized as chronically homeless, all single people, no households with children. I'm not sure how they define chronically homeless, but I would expect it's repeated experiences of being without a home. And more men are homeless than women in Washington County. And then we looked just briefly at short-term rentals. And I looked at the Airbnb listings. They said there were 227 listings in Montpelier, but in reality, 39 were actually in Montpelier. The rest were in Middlesex or East Montpelier or surrounding communities. Most of those listings were apartments or single-family homes. There were only 4 that were rooms in a larger house. So it's not a huge number, but given our housing situation, that's 35 dwellings that somebody could live in year-round that are being used for short-term rentals. And the growth in the housing stock, as you know, has been extremely slow. It's really minuscule. And the statewide growth, as you can see, 0.6% is pretty slow too. But we're even below that. So here's a couple observations from all that. Obviously, Montpelier is becoming less affordable for household of modest means. The inventory of for sale homes is very low, and most homes are under contract very quickly. We know from talking to realtors that there are bidding wars, and that when there's a bidding war, there's often a sale above the asking price. Because prices are so high, condos are becoming a more desirable option. That market, I guess, was kind of stagnant for a number of years, but with fewer single-family homes for sale, condos are seen as a decent alternative. And so condo prices are rising too. Some of this is anecdotal, but out-of-state investors have begun to solicit sales of Montpelier properties sight unseen. I don't know if anyone else has had the experience that I had a couple months ago, getting a letter in the mail from an investor from Texas saying, do you want to sell? And climate refugees have begun to see Montpelier in Vermont as a desirable place in which to move. And again, I was in my front yard, I had somebody stop me and ask me questions about Montpelier. And when I asked him where he would be moving from, he said southern Colorado because of the drought and the fires. He was looking for a place with water. So it's really not hypothetical. We're seeing that at least on a certain level. We still have many larger homes occupied by 1 or 2 people. Friends who I talk to in my age group, many of them talk about downsizing, but there's really no place to go. So they stay put, or we stay put. And high construction costs are leading to high sales prices and rent levels. That's statewide, that's nationwide. And high fuel costs are leading to significant increases in the cost of housing. Joe Triano from the Housing Authority mentioned that as a very big deal to her landlords and voucher holders. And of course, it's having an impact. Good news is it seems that our development pipeline has expanded and there are a few larger developments proposed. And finally, the number of unhoused people in Washington County remains high. So what are the barriers to new development in Montpelier? Here are just some thoughts. We don't have a lot of large developable parcels of land. We have a few, but not many. Unlike Chittenden County, we don't have a lot of private developers looking to develop in Montpelier. There's a couple of key developable parcels who are owned by just 2 people who so far haven't developed them. There's a history of neighborhood opposition when something is proposed. And then market conditions, I think that's a big thing. You all saw that with the transit center project. Construction costs are the same as Chittenden County, but the market rent or the sales price is lower. And so it's a disincentive for Chittenden County developers to work in Montpelier because if they work in Chittenden County and they can either sell or rent for more money. And a lot of the development in Montpelier over the past few years has been done by downstreet housing and community development, but they have limited capacity and they are feeling pressured to serve other communities as well. They do say they love working in Montpelier. The city's a great partner, but they can't just work in Montpelier. So a year ago, we made a number of recommendations to you, and here's a few updates. The first one was fund the Housing Trust Fund at a level of $150,000 annually. I think it's being funded around $110,000. That's great. You know, we'd like to see it at 150, but it's definitely I think a strong show of support from the council, and the trust fund is used to help get some of those developments off the ground. We also recommended supporting a shared appreciation homeownership pilot for first-time home buyers. Downstreet did submit an application to the Housing Trust Fund Advisory Committee. That application was tabled. I'm hoping it will come back, but given the discrepancy between prices and what people can afford, even with a subsidy from the trust fund, and the lack of inventory, I don't know. It's still going to be a heavy lift, but I think it is a way to get to provide opportunity for some home buyers of modest means who don't have either a lot of savings or family support or something like that. Another recommendation was working with the state of Vermont regarding the possibility of making some of the parking lots available, maybe with parking on the ground floor and housing above. Mary Hooper did work on that. She talked to the powers that be at the state, and they said they are interested in exploring that with the city. What they told her was right now they're trying to figure out what's happening with the state workforce in terms of how many people are going to be remote and how many days a week and how much parking they will need and how much office space they will need. But they also mentioned to her that maybe some of those state office buildings in the Capitol complex might be available for an alternative use such as housing as well. Acquire land and make it available for housing development. Yay. You guys are, that may happen through the Elks Club. Work with Vermont College of Fine Arts to determine if there are possibilities for housing in some of their underutilized buildings. Kevin Casey did have a conversation with those folks. Again, they're trying to figure out their future. They're doing strategic planning, but didn't slam the door on that. And then support programs to reduce homelessness. And we also have some additional recommendations. One is create a city-appointed housing committee. Talked to you about that a couple of weeks ago, and that's in process. Hopefully that will be well publicized, and people who are interested will be able to apply. Develop housing on the outskirts property. Continue the accessory dwelling unit program. As you may know, there was a federal grant for that program through the Department of Housing and Community Development. That's just about wrapped up, but that is an allowable use for Montpelier's Housing Trust Fund. And the beauty of using city money through the Housing Trust Fund is there's a lot less red tape, and it would make it a lot easier for people to add accessory dwelling units. And that is a way of adding to the housing stock. It's incremental, but every little bit helps. Undertake an inventory of potentially developable properties that could accommodate 10 or more units for future land banking opportunities. To my knowledge, that's a possibility, but nothing is in the works on that. I think we recommended last time that if a property goes up for tax sale, give first option to purchase to a nonprofit. Some of you pointed out there are virtually no tax sales, but should that happen, it could be an opportunity to get some housing or make sure that housing is a housing unit is available to a family who needs it. This one, as part of the reappraisal, undertake an inventory of short-term rentals in order to ascertain the extent to which Montpelier may be losing permanent housing. I know the reappraisal has started, but I really think, if the appraisers could just be asked to make a note of what the use of the property is, if that isn't happening already. It would give us the information that we need to know, do we have a problem, or is it really so minuscule? Let's worry about other things. Provide more support for housing initiatives through the Planning and Development Department, whether through vistas, consultants, or staff. I think that the housing situation in Montpelier is so serious, and that department is not very large, that if there's any way that they can get more person power to work on these issues, I think a lot more could be done. But there's only so much the existing staff can do. Support the Christchurch project so that it becomes viable. I do know that project recently last week received a planning grant from Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and they're going to look at a bunch of issues around it. I think because even with all the federal and state money, the funding environment is so incredibly competitive that whatever the city can do to support that project just will help give it a leg up and help it compete, because it is a difficult site because it's downtown. It involves demolition, and it's always easier to build out in a field, but it could be an important resource. Educate the public regarding housing issues and encourage engagement and dialogue regarding new developments. Maybe this is something that the new housing committee will do, but it seems like whenever or almost whenever something is proposed, there's a lot of opposition, and people need to be heard and need to be listened to and have input. But we also, I think, need to break the logjam where historically not a whole lot has been built new, in part because of neighborhood opposition and developers just going away discouraged. And then finally support a bridge solution to house people who are unhoused. So those are our recommendations. That's what we know about the state of housing in Montpelier right now, and I'd be happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Thank you so much, Polly. And thanks for that update on the recommendations. That was helpful because it's nice to know that there are things that we can do. I do have a question for you. One of the things that has come up from the Planning Commission is a discussion around density. And I am wondering about if the group has thoughts on lifting density requirements or maximums.
We didn't really talk about it except to get a report at our last meeting from Mike Miller. And he explained his thinking that other things needed to happen first, but we didn't really take a position on it.
Okay. Because if that comes back up to the council, that would be helpful if you all do have an opinion about it.
Okay.
So, other thoughts? Lauren, go ahead.
First of all, thank you so much. The amount of research you've and the committee have been doing is incredible and such a resource. And so just thanks for so much work and thought that's gone into that. Gives us some really good next steps, I think. My only question was knowing that the state just put huge amounts of money and, some of the issues you were raising, for example, there's the program that's going to help with covering some construction costs to get at that middle income family and so on. Like, are there good resources available to you all? How well connected are you to all? We've got this like slug of money that has to be spent really quickly. And, are there ways that we're just making sure that Montpelier can take as full advantage of the federal funds and then the state allocating, a huge amount to VHCB and other partners. And so just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think we need a project, and maybe the next one in line is Christchurch. I don't know. But you have to have a project to go after the funding. And so I do think from funders' perspectives, Montpelier is considered a good partner. Just like Downstreet said, because the city's been supportive, and with the Housing Trust Fund, taxpayer money goes in, and projects here like the French Blocks and Taylor Street and whatever have been remarkably successful. I mean, it really, I can't remember one that's been turned down, but we need a project. Well,
other thoughts? Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's as Lauren said, really well researched, but I think very accessible to and useful information. When you're talking Elks Club development, is there any specific type of housing you're proposing, like affordable housing or mixed, or we need everything?
We haven't had a conversation about that in any detail as a task force. I mean, if you're asking me personally, I think we need a mixture. I think we need housing for families. We need housing for seniors, and not just low-income seniors. So people who have big older homes have a place to move to. Obviously, we have a situation with people who don't have houses at all. So I think we need it all. Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
So first of all, thank you. It was excellent. I just want to add on to this. Last Thursday and Friday, I was at a meeting of Vermont Town and City Managers, and we heard a presentation from Seth Leonard from Vermont Housing Finance. And I'm telling you, you could take those slides and just put Vermont everywhere it says Montpelier, and it was almost the identical presentation about the challenges facing the entire state. And, the data, and talking to my colleagues, everyone's struggling with the same exact issue, with the possible exception of Chittenden County. But it's the same shortages, the same costs, the same out of state buyers. I mean, you name the issues, it's coming up everywhere. And so it really is a huge challenge. You know, I think some of ours are a little bit more exaggerated. On the other hand, we have maybe a little bit more demand, but
Yeah.
it's really, we're not alone in this, folks. And it's really, and so the solutions are very similar. But, you know, the one thing we heard from people, and I've heard the last several years, and I think maybe here, is that, you know, if the public, and if it's Montpelier or anywhere else, if we're not able to invest, like buying the Elks Club or putting in some of the things, you know, the old model of putting that all on the developer, unless you want super high end,
Yeah.
it just isn't going to happen because it can't work. I mean, for those, Ian might be the only one left, Donna, maybe when we were looking at housing at 1 Taylor Street, and it was originally going to be market, and Redstone just came to us and said, we cannot make this work.
Yeah.
We can't, you know, for the costs and everything, it's the only people that can make this work is down street and, you know, our affordable housing group. And that's what we went with. So I think it's a huge challenge. And as we go forward, you know, we need to be thinking about how we can invest in housing and same with the transitional housing. The state's not going to do it all. So I urge us all to be, you know, if we think this is a huge issue, which of course it is, that we'd be willing to participate.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking today, I mean, the state has invested millions and millions of dollars in affordable housing. And, you know, tens of thousands of units have been built, and we still, I mean, the situation is worse than ever. And I guess it probably, if we did nothing, and if Montpelier had done nothing and didn't have the trust fund and didn't have, you know, housing friendly zoning, and it probably would be worse, but you know, you can't really measure what might have been.
He quoted average price in the state of $360,000 per unit to build.
Yeah.
Cost
To build. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. For an apartment.
to develop, to bring for any housing, just a housing unit costs. So, you know, you look at the amount of money they've put in versus, and they had an estimated shortage of, I can't remember how many thousands, stick 20,000 or something. And you think, oh, that's attainable. And you look at how much money they put in divided by 360, and you're like, oh yeah, no, it's going to be forever.
Mm.
And that's just if the state were putting money in building housing.
I do want to point out, so my husband works for Habitat for Humanity, Central Vermont. His comment was that, you know, for all the money that's been going into housing from the state, a lot of it goes into rentals, and home ownership is a way that a lot of Americans build equity. And if people don't have access to home ownership, then they're being basically denied a main mechanism for building wealth over time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's, you know, when I think about you know, housing that might go out on like the Elks Club property, if that's what we do, you know, I think about condos, you know, things that are high efficiency but have a home ownership component to it. Anyway, I just thought I'd put that out there.
Yeah.
I just want to have
go
one
ahead.
last comment too, because I wanted to support what Polly just said. Was I asked specifically, you know, again, it was, there's all this money. How do you get it? And I said, well, how do the municipalities get it? And they said, you don't. There doesn't come. You have to go through a developer. You have to have a project. It has to be applied. There is not a direct subsidy to that. You know, you have to partner with a housing provider. So that was an interesting piece of information.
Yeah. Go ahead. Peter Kelman, go ahead.
Yeah, Peter Kelman. I worked with Polly on this report, and I think it does paint a very clear picture. When I moved to Montpelier 6 years ago, it just was not like that. The last 6 years, a lot has changed. What hasn't changed are two things. There's no one answer. There are going to have to be a bunch of different answers. There are going to have to be answers that have to do with rental and answers that have to do with ownership. There are going to have to be answers that have to do with low income, missing middle, and the upper reaches as well. Luckily, we don't have to address those. Those will be addressed, but they will play a role. For example, in the Habitat project, if you have lots that can be purchased by people who are going to build $500,000 houses, that brings money to the project so that you can build lower income projects. And the same thing could be done at the Elks Club. So it's going to require some real multi-purpose, strategies, and that's why we need a housing committee. Polly did almost all that research herself. You need a committee where you have 9 or 11, 10 people who are doing that research, who are doing working groups like the Montpelier Energy Advisory Committee, break down into working groups and tackle these different problems, come together and see how they can blend. So please, let's get that committee going. We need to get it going right away. You asked Polly some questions. She can't answer them. She's not even sure there's going to be another meeting of the Housing Task Force. Right? They typically take off July. There'll be one more meeting at least in June to say goodbye. So Bill, really, got to get that thing going. It hasn't been announced. It's listed on the website as the City Housing Committee or the Montpelier City. You look under H, it's not there. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Whitaker again. I recommended months ago, 6 months ago, that the homelessness task force be dissolved and merged into the housing committee. That was before this discussion of this having an officially city appointed housing committee. It's still a good idea. It just because there's it'll be a emergency housing subcommittee of folks that are looking at the same developable parcels, temporary interim use of, for instance, the Home Farm Road project, which should be taken by eminent domain rather than let it be sold to Connor. That's an example that we can't continue. But here's the thing about attracting developers. This is where our track record of mismanagement of our infrastructure repairs and our sidewalks and our storm drains, the handicap doors at the transit center still don't work. The three years later, the construction, the vinyl in the storm drains along the bike path is still there. So basically, the mismanagement that's been going on for so long discourages competent builders from coming here because they've seen the way we neglect our own infrastructure. So we've got some cleaning up to do, and I think it'll require new management before we're going to really get the kind of developer partners that we need to get this job done.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I actually am not in the Zoom. I don't see anybody else in the Zoom. Yes, Jack.
Thanks, Polly. Great report. I just wanted to mention for people who may not be aware of it that we've studied a bunch of this stuff already, and Polly and I were on a committee back in 2011 looking at barriers to new housing. And Polly and I were on it from the Housing Task Force. Council members Angela Timpone and Nancy Sherman were on it, and a bunch of other people. And it's on the city's webpage, and I would encourage people who are interested to look at it because it's all the factors are still there, and it's 11 years ago.
So one of the things that I worry about with that, well, with the barriers to housing in general, is that it feels like the answer is that we can build our way out of this problem. And we have built more housing, but the problem still persists. And so I wonder, like, how much housing would we need for it to really actually help? You know, we've added, I mean, even since I've been on the council, we've added quite a few units actually in the city. I feel like we knew at one point like how many units had been added. What would it take if it's some ghastly number, well, then what do we do with that? Like, does that mean building up in some places? I know that would be very scary for a lot of people in Montpelier. But I guess it would be good to know, like, really what an actual solution would look like in that situation. Yeah, Peter, I'll invite you up.
Yeah, just because I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
I think the number that has been bandied about was 100 a year.
Per year.
Yeah.
Ending at what point? We don't know.
No, but that's just a number. But actually, and this is a very good point. It's not just building up. We have some huge houses that are owned by seniors that could be broken up into 3 or 4 units. We've got places that could take a 3 or 4 story apartment unit, such as is being proposed for by the Boves, and possibly if the motel came up for sale, something could be put there. So there are places that you could do that. There are also ways to get with greater density. That's the reason why the density. I would say that ultimately the new committee will say we should raise density requirements to allow like cluster housing. The Isabel Circle proposal has cottage housing, and then it has lots around it that could be built by private developers for more expensive housing. So again, lots of different solutions. I don't think barriers should be seen as, no, we're not going to be able to do this. Barriers are challenges to be figured out how to solve that problem. And the answer is always going to be answers. It really will be. Don't get too fixated on any one answer. I really think that's the important.
Thank you, Peter. And I see Mike Miller, you've got your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, just want to go and answer your question for the minutes. When we did the math on well, we came up minimum. Obviously, don't know what the number will be, but it would have to be at least, we need to add at least 240 housing units just to kind of get us out. And that doesn't really reflect any demand that might be, unmet demand. Prices to stabilize, you need vacancies around 5%. And so that would be basically at least 240 units, and very likely many more than that. So that we've always tried to target that it look like much, but it's actually quite difficult. I mean, that's basically building a transit center every year. And we've got a number of projects in the pipeline that if we can get them to start to come through, we would start to be making some reasonable dents into that number and then seeing where it gets us. But again, those were just basic number was at least 240.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
I can just follow up a little bit too. The last time we did the community survey in 2009, the question was posed, do you support the construction of 500 new housing units over the next, it was either 5 or 10 years? And people overwhelmingly supported. So the council at that point had sort of set a 500 goal. I think if you take out some of what's been done, it's probably not quite 240. I mean, it's a little bit more. I think those numbers are not totally inconsistent either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Any other thoughts or comments? Donna, go ahead.
Well, I just haven't thanked you tonight, but I really, really appreciate it. And I think you are our queen of housing. And even if you're not on the committee, we will come and get you.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Thank you for
Polly.
your time, and thank you for your interest.
Absolutely. Well, and on a related note, the Housing Trust Fund recommendation, I feel like that one's pretty straightforward, but do you want to explain it?
This is from staff. I think Mike and or Josh will weigh in if necessary, but mentioned this a little bit last time when we talked about forming the housing committee. Remind you that the original housing task force was actually a task force made up of providers. So it was the housing authority, downstream, various people that were involved in provision of housing services. So when the housing trust fund was created to help fund projects, I think that the trust fund, I mean, the task force themselves realized, hey, we shouldn't be the people making recommendations on these projects. And so a separate housing trust fund committee was created, some of whom overlap with task force members and some who don't. And that group really meets generally about once or twice a year to sort of put out the RFP for funding and then review the requests and make a recommendation for the council. And it's our recommendation, our staff recommendation that if that group be disbanded and that be folded into this housing committee, and because it won't be a task force per se, and if somebody is on it that is a potential applicant, they can recuse themselves. We do have an ethics policy, but that in general, it's meant to be a working committee. And not only will it streamline things, but it allows those people on the committee to get a firsthand look at what what the requests for funding are, what the project needs, what the costs are. And I think it's an educational process as well. So, and we just really don't need two separate groups if we're gonna fold this. So to remind people that haven't gone through it, the housing task, the trust fund puts out a request, they get the funds, they make recommendations, but still comes to the city council for final approval. So, and there have been times when the council didn't totally go along with the recommendation, but usually they do. So they don't have any final authority to make decisions. It still rests here. So we think it's a good idea to streamline this process. Obviously, both of these committees are formed by the council at the will of the council. So it's not like, they don't have any legal standing other than your appointment of them.
Jack.
I support this idea. We discussed this at our housing task force meeting last week, and there are really two alternatives that, I should say that I've served on the Housing Trust Fund Advisory Committee for years. And there are two alternatives that we talked about doing. One was to dispense with some kind of committee review and just rely on staff coming to the city council and the council making the decision based on staff's proposals. And the other was the proposal we have tonight. And my experience on the Trust Fund Advisory Committee is that it has never been a rubber stamp for the proposals for the people who are coming in with applications, and that we've always been given scrutiny to the ideas, talked about ways that the ideas could be made better, and before making the final recommendations to the council. And so I think there's real value to having some kind of committee review by people who have made it their business to become expert in the field of housing in Montpelier. And so for that reason, I think we should adopt the recommendation to assign this task to the Housing Committee.
And dissolve the Housing Trust Fund Committee.
Yeah.
Is that a motion?
That is my motion.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
Okay. Further discussion? Yes.
Peter Kelman, I'm in favor of doing this, but the timing has to be done right. I urge you not to dissolve the Housing Trust Fund until the new Housing Committee is actually operational and is ready to do it. I mean, I was on the CJAC, the Social and Economic Justice Advisory Committee, when it started brand new. It took us 6 months from the time we were appointed to really get a committee that was operating. What happens if you guys need a recommendation next October? I wonder whether the housing committee is going to be ready by next October to take this on. So can you just figure out a way to do this so that you get word from the housing committee, we're ready, and then dissolve it? Don't dissolve it now, because otherwise you maybe find you're having the second option, which is staff just making the recommendations.
Okay, thank you. I just want to recognize that I am letting you speak multiple times because you're on the housing task force.
This is a separate issue.
Yes, but yeah, okay. Donna, yes.
Along with the agenda sheet on this, it talks about when effective, that the effect that the new committee would be effective. Once it's there, then the other committee will dissolve. So it didn't put the date like today on it.
Okay.
That should be the exact motion.
Hey, so that's okay.
So does that need to be stated in the motion?
What do you think, Jack?
I'm happy to say that my motion includes that the Housing Trust Fund Advisory Committee would not be dissolved until the membership of the Housing Committee is in place.
Okay. And your agreement with that? Okay. Okay. Further discussion? And not seeing anyone online. Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. And let's, I'm looking forward to hearing more from the Housing Committee. We're at all, really. I'm looking forward to them existing. All right, on to the public records fee policy. Shall I turn this over to you, Bill?
Yeah, and maybe I'll kick it right to Cameron if
Okay.
she did most of the heavy lifting on this. This is basically taking the statute for public records and trying to formalize it into a policy. We get a lot of requests and they come in. We have streamlined them by creating a public records request, but we're trying to become even more efficient and clear about how they'll be handled. And we haven't really traditionally charged people, but the state does allow it to be done. And we've had some requests of late that have required a pretty large amount of work to comply with, and the law allows us to assess fees. So that was our intent, was to follow the law as we have been and help defer costs when possible.
So Bill just stole a lot of my thunder. So council, thank you for letting me come speak to you tonight. I'm Assistant City Manager Cameron Niedermeyer, for folks who don't know me. So we put this policy together. I worked closely with our attorney. What it really is, and it's our recommendation to take a policy that basically mirrors the law. The whole policy, if you read through it, it mirrors the law. It hopefully, I hope that I did a good job breaking down what that actually means. So it's a little bit more relatable and understandable. It shows folks how we would be responding, who's responding, and where they need to direct their questions to. That's our biggest issue as staff, honestly, is that requests are coming in just to emails, to people who might not be in the office, to just folks. And I think on one hand, it's a really great sign that people feel comfortable and safe asking questions with staff, but it makes it very hard to track and respond to public records. So we're hoping that, by putting a policy in place that we can very easily point to, will help sort of streamline some of those requests coming in. The other part of this that might be a little bit more heavy on the discussion is it does change sort of the fees schedule slightly. It does increase it very slightly from what the state has as their fee schedule. I'm hoping you'd be interested in adopting this schedule, which is just slightly separate from theirs, to where we discussed it as it not as a deterrent, but as a realistic understanding of how much paper and equipment costs these days if we're making large printing projects, et cetera. Most of our requests are not for print, so I don't anticipate this being super impactful to folks. Most people want digital copies because that is the way that most of our data is stored, or most of our records are stored is digitally.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry. In that this schedule differs slightly from the state schedule, we are allowed to do that.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the process by which councils are allowed to make their own fee schedule.
Okay. Gotcha.
So the only thing that I think is important to communicate to the public is that a lot of the things that we do during the day and we respond to requests are technically us creating records for people. We do that, I think, pretty frequently. What it becomes difficult is when we're compiling and creating data for people, that takes a long time. And so we are running into that issue as staff. It is really eating into our capacity time, thus really just making it very clear that the law does give us the authority to charge. If y'all are not interested in this fee schedule, I would ask that we do adopt the state's fee schedule if you're not interested in this one, because I think it is very important that we recognize we do have the ability to do that by state law, and that it would be very helpful to have the support from city council to just say, hey, they have the authority to do this. They could ask for funding if the project is large enough. I also want to make sure that the public understands that if you do ask us to make a record, we will look at it. We'll see what it would take, and we would let you know beforehand, before we did any work, if it would cost anything, so that we're not putting you out that way.
Okay. Cool. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Oh, I think that's Chief's radio.
Yeah. Questions? Yes, go ahead, Carrie.
So I'm just thinking about the difference between, thinking about the difference between providing a copy of a record and providing access for inspection of records. And so it's, am I correct that we are allowed to charge for providing copies of records or making new records, but we're not allowed to charge for allowing inspection of records? Okay.
Correct. And where that really comes in is when somebody wants, so if it's just taking a digital copy of a record and emailing it, there's no cost to produce that. If someone wants photocopies of a file or wants them, sent out or turned into something else, searchable PDFs or something like that, that's a record we don't have. And so there's a cost to create that. And so we would, seek payment, but they're also welcome to look at, if they don't want to do that, they're welcome to look at the file itself. And there's no charge for that there's no charge for that. But the real thing is creating the records. And that is, I think some people, if a record exists, we're required to provide it. But sometimes people want us to do some, I want to know this compared to some analysis. And technically, we don't have to do it at all. We try to comply. If we do it and it takes some time, then people need to know it. And we don't want to get into this thing where sometimes we do it and sometimes we don't, or sometimes we charge and sometimes we don't. So we want to be very clear in the policy about that.
Thank you, Bill.
Jack.
I think what Bill said is a very good point. I think the people don't always recognize that this is a statute that doesn't allow for production of information. It's production of documents. And those are two different things. I think this is a good thing to go forward with. I've certainly heard that it can be quite burdensome and divert city employees from other duties to respond to public records requests. I have one question that we may want to address in the in the document, and I haven't read through this that many times, so I'm not, but I think I'm right about this. In the third page, under copies of public records, charges, it's permissive, except where otherwise provided by law, the custodian may charge and collect the following costs, and then the costs are listed. And I wonder if we want to have a provision in the policy that says that charges would be applied uniformly and without discrimination with regard to the person who's requesting it or the use for which it's being requested, because I think we want to be absolutely clear that the city is going to treat everyone who requests copies fairly and equally.
Good suggestion.
Donna.
Just one piece of that, you're not even allowed to ask why they want them. So would that need to be stated as far as the purpose? You mentioned.
No, I don't think so. In fact, I think we could.
That's what I heard you say that.
Yeah,
okay.
I was just thinking that I can imagine, there are these web pages that like to collect mugshots of people, and they just post mugshots of anyone who's arrested up on the web page, because I think celebrities, people are some people take pleasure in the suffering of others, and so they see people who are arrested and they like to do that, and so that's a commercial activity, and even if it's a commercial activity, we don't want to. We can't say, well, we're treating you differently because it's a commercial activity. So that might be addressed simply by changing the word may to shall, and shall without discrimination as to the requester. Something like that. We want to play around with the language, but that's my thinking.
Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree very strongly with that suggestion. And that was sort of my understanding of what this policy was setting out to do, was to say, this is how we are going to handle public records requests. And so I think it might just be a matter of changing may to will or shall. And that could be it right there. Saying this is what we do. This is our policy. If you request records, this is the fee schedule. This is how it works. And I would like to see that so that it's not left to the discretion of whoever's providing the records.
Jack, do you have a specific place where you could see a may turning into a shall?
Yes, on page 3, under copies of public records, line 1, charges, it says the custodian may charge and collect. I would change the may to shall.
Oh, okay, right there.
And there may not be any other place like that.
Okay.
Just question on that. So I generally get that and understand it. Do you want to set a minimum, like if the fee is like at least $1? I say that because we often have someone coming in, they're looking at a lister card, an assessor's card, they make a single photocopy that's a 10-cent copy, and they may not have a dime with them. And it seems, but I would say maybe if we say for any total accumulated fee above $1, we shall do that. I think ought to be some discretion for a single copy type thing. We don't, like you said, we don't get many of them anymore, but we used to. And it was, we'd ask people for dimes and they would just be like, I don't have one. And we're like,
there you go. Yep.
Take your copy.
Yeah, I agree with that. For billing for time, we have,
right.
It doesn't start until 30 minutes.
Right.
So the first 30 minutes are free.
And that's in statute.
Yeah. And so I would even suggest $5 or $10 rather than $1, because, you can think about what makes sense given the volume of the requests that you're getting, but if you're collecting a lot of dollar bills, that may be more effort than it's worth.
Yeah, we're getting almost no requests these days in that sort of middle, the photocopies, CD type thing, or it's very rare. But the real request is the amount of time it takes to seek, search.
Create
And in
records,
fact,
yeah.
in many cases now, we're actually paying a third party to do the searches because we use our technical search. So, and we're not even allowed to necessarily to charge that direct cost.
So did we land on, after $5? Okay. Any other comments from council?
The only hesitation that I have with $5, if I can have a pushback on that, is that some of the things that cost physical money, like the CDs and stuff, it's not like we have a huge stack of these things on hand and we would need paid to purchase the thing. So that's really where that fee came from, is me assessing costs of the things and how I would get them if people want it. So maybe $1 sounds great to me because a lot of the more daily activities are not reaching that threshold. But some of the things that would require us to go spend money do hit that threshold.
So like, so you'd be more in favor of $1 being the threshold?
I would be. So saying something like, except where otherwise provided by law, the custodian shall charge and collect the following costs for making a public record for any public record that costs more than $1.
That sounds okay to me. Yeah. Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think overall, I like having a policy and I like having it be consistently applied. Definitely want to err towards, our values of access. These are public records, making sure that, everyone can get what they need. I guess two questions I had. One was if there are other communities, so legally we're allowed to go above and beyond. Have other communities done this? Is this consistent with what any other communities are charging for the fee schedule? And I was just curious, like how many are going beyond 30 minutes? Is that the right threshold? Where did that number come from as opposed to an hour or some other number?
It tracks the law. So that's actually in statute, is the 30 minutes. I did not do any benchmarking outside of what our legal representation told me. He gave me a few examples of other communities that do charge a little more, but they were they weren't Vermont. So
and just to weigh in on that, the city's ability to charge fees that still have to reflect real cost. You can't just charge a fee because you want to charge a fee. So it has to reflect the actual, you can't mark up on those kinds of things. So the fees were attempted to, a CD costs $1. That's what it costs. The average cost loaded for, $60 an hour for an employee at $1 a minute with benefits. That's a real cost. So we can't say, we're going to charge $5 a minute because we just want to. So the law requires us to make sure that it reflects actual cost. So that's what this was meant to look at. So we didn't really look, different communities could have different actual costs.
Anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love if we're the city, town, community in Vermont that's the most expensive to access public records in. I understand where this is coming from, and I just personally want to err towards access and affordable. I mean, with the equity committee lens, like this seems like it could become certain people can access records now and other people can't.
Right. So to be clear, we're not seeking to run this up. We're trying to reflect actual costs. This is your policy and your priority. So, I mean, if you want to go with the state fees, I mean, we don't have any, there's no ill, it's fine with us. We just thought you should see what our estimate of actual costs for these were.
And I think you had.
Or if you don't want to charge fees, I mean, that is also your policy decision. I want to be clear about that. The state allows this and, but we are getting a lot of them and they are very, some of them are very time consuming and distracting.
And Lauren, to answer your question about how many we're getting, right? I can say pretty, I would say a lot of our leadership team spends a good percentage of their week responding to public records requests of some variety. I don't think all of them rise to the level of actually charging. I think we get a few that take a good amount of time. And those are the ones that I think a policy are really important for. Because a lot of the analysis is what they're asking for, not the actual records. We've never denied anyone ability to come and look at things. It's taking things out of different databases and combining them and giving that kind of information is what really takes the time, and what we would be, being more consistent about charging for.
Or for example, a request that wants to go back 2 or 3 years, all communications for 2 or 3 years. So we have to have them all sorted.
Mm-hmm.
And then the key person, usually me or whoever's involved, has to then go through all of them to figure out which ones are relevant and which ones aren't, sort them, do all that, see if there's any exemptions. Oh, we don't usually claim that many, and then present them. So that, that takes a lot of time. And, a lot of our requests are just, I want a copy of a police report for my insurance, and those go really quickly. But, over half, I'd say, really just come from one place, and they're often very long and not very kind of vague. So it takes a lot of work.
Any other questions from council? Okay. Comments from the public?
Yeah, I think I am Steve Whitaker, a significant requester of public records. That's what happens when you manage things or mismanage things in a manner that requires a lot of accountability and transparency. I was quoted $769 to get copies of videos of the meetings that we were required by law to record during the pandemic. I'm not sure you're aware of that, but that type of storage management operation by the courts have been interpreted to be an incentive to not provide, a disincentive to provide records by storing them improperly. If we've recorded Zoom recordings, they should be on a hard drive somewhere that you can say, here's the link, download what you want. But to abuse the statute to suggest that I have to pay $700 to watch the meetings where the public business was being done, to have a copy of them, because I don't have the broadband capability to watch them in real time or stream them. The statute explicitly says the requester can inspect or request a copy. So there's no distinction there. What's attempting is saying it's good enough that you get to stream it if you have good enough broadband. Obviously, Mike Miller didn't have good enough broadband tonight. So that's a key point. Also, Montpelier is unusual in that we outsource both our IT and our legal, which increases the cost that you're going to attempt to shoulder on. This is too late and too big of an issue to be adopted tonight. This is something that you really need to inform the public of how it's going to impact, which includes understanding the kind of stuff I'm going to tell you and debating it publicly, not just ramming it through like you did. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, if you think this is simple enough to adopt, I'd be happy to pillory it. Who's $2 a minute? Who's worth $2 a minute? Who gets that besides Bill Frazier? That's absurd. I've asked recently for the water billing data. I was told Sarita can export the data set. A database is a record. It's not just documents, Jack. It's a record can be a database. So the entire database of the water billing, including the legend of what's in what field, is a requestable record, and it only takes minutes to export. But instead, they're sending me 6 different PDFs that, cannot be imported into a spreadsheet to be analyzed. It's a lot of game playing. Your staff is basically obstructing transparency into the water billing anomalies that people are complaining about. So, CDs and DVDs, flash drives, if we're going to adopt this state schedule, it should be updated to request to reflect the current cost of CDs and DVDs and
Steve,
thumb
you're
drives.
at 3 minutes now, so if you could wrap up your comments.
No, I just think your prejudicial, arbitrary and unequal treatment of my comments versus anybody else who's spoken tonight is really an insult and, again, a disqualification from the Senate.
So I don't think that is accurate, but thank you for wrapping that up. Any other comments?
Mayor, I just didn't know if you wanted me to address any of
If
that.
you would like to, yes.
I do want to make it clear to residents, I think, that no one is trying to keep anything from folks. Mr. Whitaker's request for information, if he wanted to see the videos, he was more than welcome to come and inspect them at any time. We gave him ample opportunity to come in and see those records. He was asking for a record creation. He wanted a database that we don't have and we don't keep because we're not required to. So we declined creating a new record unless he wanted to pay for the time, but he's able to come and watch videos anytime in City Hall if he wants to. And that offer still stands. So please do not hesitate to reach out. If you have any questions about information that you want, we can work with anyone to help get you what you need.
Thank you, Cameron. Vicki Ann Lane, go ahead.
If somebody needs something on a CD, flash drive, or whatever media, why don't they just bring it themselves? Bring the CD, flash drive, whatever media that they want it on and put it on themselves. If you've got a computer is there a computer? Would there be a computer at City Hall? If I came down and said, I'd like to watch this video, would there be a computer there that I could see it on?
Yes, we would accommodate that for you, Vicki.
And in that case, I can download that to my CD.
Yes.
And leave.
If it has a CD drive.
Well,
yeah, this might not actually accommodate that, but yes.
Whatever, I mean, bring my own portable CD drive.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I just thank you, Vicki, for that. That's a good point. I just want to note, I have a little bit of hesitancy around people just bringing their own USB drives.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's
probably shouldn't
maybe
stick
we
random
shouldn't
USB drives in computers.
Yeah. Yeah. So just noting that.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Maybe if they brought a brand new one still in the package.
So, thank you. Okay. All right. I think that is it. Is there a motion?
This was tried to sort of write down what you said. So hopefully that.
For any record that costs more than $1.
And then the word changed to shall.
Do you mean like any cumulative?
That cumulatively costs. I like that you guys get to watch me try to spell things.
Is that a fair addition? No judgment. It's all good.
It'll fix. It's fine.
It's fine. Donna, go ahead.
I'll make the motion that we approve the public record inspection copying transmission policy as edited.
Second. Okay, motion and a second. Further discussion. Connor.
Yeah, I don't know if it needs to be in the motion or anything, but if we could just maybe set a time that we would get an update on, what we're doing, whether it be 6 months or something. I'd just like to get a snapshot of that in case we decide to adjust it again.
Sure. Yes.
Why don't we do that during budget?
Yeah, right.
Lauren.
Yeah, it sounds like we're moving ahead with it as is. So yeah, I would very much just an understanding kind of who it's impacting. Is it creating any barriers for some folks in the community to access records? And kind of how many people are now paying for records? Like, I like the idea of the consistency of shall so that there's not discretion, but I could see where some discretion and judgment might sometimes be a valuable tool to have for city staff. So I could see that creating some issues. So it'd be helpful to know kind of how it's playing out on the ground.
Okay. All right. There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Okay. Great. So we are done with our regular business. So we're going to move on to council reports. I am a creature of habit. Donna, are you okay to go first?
I'm just going to say that I'm looking forward to June. I'm hoping they'll have steady, reasonable weather. Everybody enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
We have a holiday coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of touch back again on the gun violence issue and the recent experience that our public school system has had, and just that in this particular incident, this potential threat in Montpelier school, and then there was another one in a different school system a few years ago here in Vermont, where both were stopped before anything happened because other people who heard things or saw things spoke up and brought it to attention. And I just want to thank the folks who have done that, and to ask us all to remember that we need to really be looking out for each other and really be paying attention to each other, and really we do need more sensible gun safety laws. Absolutely. We also need a culture that recognizes people's humanity and connection, and because there's a much bigger cultural issue that we have that's resulting in this gun violence. So that's all.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Connor, go ahead.
That's well said, and along the same lines, I think a lot of people are feeling kind of helpless, hopeless. So Gun Sense and Moms Demand Action will be at the farmers market this weekend, tabling a bit. There are ways we can, plug people into a way where they feel like they're doing something, rather than just sitting back and waiting for the next thing to happen. I was thinking a lot about a quote. There's a Mother Jones quote that, pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living. And I think it's pretty applicable to something like this. That's how we do honor people. So thank you. And if anybody wants to join us this weekend, it would be great.
Jack.
I think I'll pass tonight.
Great, Lauren.
Two just thoughts for future agendas. One, public restroom was brought up earlier. I do wonder about, I know we'd been having conversations with, about could the state partner with us in this? And now that the legislature's gone, so whatever opportunity there. So it would be great. I think I'm on that committee, happy to meet whenever. So it would be great to just get that going now that we have a better sense of what happened with the state. And just in that vein, I was wondering about if it's worth inviting our legislators, or at least some of them, to come give us an update on what passed, what kind of the things on our legislative agenda, and speaking to funding opportunities, things in the budget that we should be aware of as a city, just kind of get that overview. We've got some people with a real finger on the pulse of the money in particular. So I was thinking about that, and yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Great. I just also want to circle back to the issue of gun violence, and just recognize also that people are I think in our community, even in a lot of pain and just really frustrated and looking for some answers right now. And I do hope that people turn this sense, the feelings that folks are having right now turned into action in terms of getting in touch with legislators, getting educated on the universe of kinds of common sense gun safety legislation that can be enacted, and just hope that that's helpful as a way to honor the dead. So with that, I think I will be done. John.
I'll just mention that a gentleman from the American Legion came in today and asked me to sing the national anthem to kick off the Memorial Day festivities this time around. So I will be singing.
That's great. All right, and Bill.
I just have one quick thing. You may recall at the last meeting, we set our summer schedule and we talked about needing a special call-in meeting to set the tax rate. And we'd tentatively pencil that in on Wednesday, the 13th. Wondering if we could do that sometime on Monday, the 11th. That works best with our schedule. It literally should be, it's a math calculation, but you have to vote to set it. So it should be very short meeting. Would be call-in only, or
So you said July 11th.
July 11. Yes, it's a Monday. Instead of the Wednesday, the 13th, if we could do it on Monday, the 11th, it would just, Kelly asked if we could do that, it would help speed up. It's going to be, because of the, anyway, yes, it'll fit our
Are we
schedule.
thinking like noon?
It could be whatever time of day works. We could do it noon, we could do it whenever. It really, like I said, shouldn't take a long period of time. We really only need 4 people, but we'd said potentially the 13th for this, and just wanted to change it, so.
How does noon work for folks?
Noon.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up. Okay, great.
Yeah, great, beautiful.
Awesome.
Great, beautiful. That's all I have.
That's right, meeting. Okay, got that in my calendar. Okay, I think that is it. So without objection, we will consider the meeting adjourned 10:11. Whew.